So, welcome everyone. For me, it's so limiting standing behind this. I do like cheating. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Zsofia Sziranyi, and today, together with my teammates from the Commission Digital Ready Policymaking team, being Cecile, Guasch, and Alessio Nardin, we will be your crew to guide us through this very nice workshop, which has two themes or two parts. But the common glue is that it's about digital ready policymaking and semantics. And as we are at the pre-conference of SEMIC, I trust that you have some ideas about semantics. So I would like to start more with the digital ready part, which is my cup of tea. So what is digital ready policymaking, and why to try to make some sense in relation to SEMICs and semantics? So digital ready policymaking is basically rethinks how we approach policymaking, how we draft, design, and eventually implement policies. And it relies on a mindset shift of policy officers. So, and the important thing is what we call upon, that it's super important that policymakers think of the digital implementation of their policies from the start on. And to achieve that, the best thing to do is to hold hands with those who are very close to the implementation, be them IT people, data experts, or eventually people who run the mandated services, for example. And if this can happen, then we can benefit from this cooperation, because we can expect a much smoother, timelier, and cost-effective implementation of our policies. So this is the main idea behind digital ready policymaking, and it also emphasizes that it needs to be human-centered, of course. So all this team should always think with the users in mind and design the journey together for the beneficiaries' interest. Digital ready policymaking also is an excellent vehicle now in view of the Interoperability Europe Act, which is also the leitmotif of this year's SEMIC conference, because the Act entered into force this April, and among others, it has an obligation, the so-called interoperability assessment obligation, which will be mandatory from January next year. And these assessments are really specific because they will call upon public sector bodies, be them at European level, like the European Commission, or at national level, or even regional or local level, to do such kind of interoperability assessments before they take a decision on binding requirements which affect cross-border interoperability. I shortened a bit the definition because it's quite lengthy in the Act, but the main idea is here again, and you may find some similarities with digital ready policymaking I just explained. So they call upon again the decision makers and their teams to consider digital interoperability aspects and implementation impacts before they take a decision. Exactly like in digital ready policymaking, that we call upon that before you table a legal proposal, please consider the digital considerations. And this is the link between interoperability assessment and digital ready policymaking. And we are just with our teams finding and figuring out how to make the most of these two processes. So this is still the benefit of digital ready policymaking, but we also recognize that digital ready policymaking needs semantic expertise. So here it comes the link for today's workshop. On the one hand, because acts can mandate certain semantic specificities. So some legal proposals will talk about data exchange and even mandate some standards to use, or some data formats even. So this is then interesting to discuss with semantic experts. This is the right way to go. This is the right standard to choose. And another angle where digital ready policymaking relates to semantics is that the legal text itself has and could have the power to get machine readable, machine consumable, eventually machine executable. And to get there, we need also to structure the legal text itself, and there we will need the expertise of our semantic experts. So you see that there are quite some interesting legal semantics domain which emerge in the domain which we call digital ready policymaking, and today is basically a very nice opportunity to continue a discussion which we started with some of you already in October in Madrid at the previous SEMIC conference. This was the first occasion for our team where we brought digital ready policymaking in the semantic world, and we had really lively and interesting discussions and rich exchanges. So this gave us the stamina to go for the second time and continue this work today, where we will start a bit broader. So in the first part of the workshop, we will have speakers who start looking into the digital ready policymaking, mainly the policymaking aspect. For example, why is it important to review existing legislation and how to approach that in a structured way? Then how to design new policies that they are digital ready, what kind of tools to use, maybe visualization, or else. And then even bringing it farther and closer to the reality, how to translate the legal text into digitalized services. So this is what we will touch upon in the first part before the coffee break. Then we resource ourselves, and then with the guidance of Alessio and Cecile, we will go and zoom into a quite specific use case for digital-ready policymaking, which is regulatory reporting. Regulatory reporting is basically when a legal act has a requirement to gather information for various purposes, usually for monitoring, but it can be other reasons like risk assessment or feeding new policy ideas. The main element is here that there is a requirement that someone or some entity needs to send some information, a certain frequency and maybe format to another body. And this is policy domain agnostic. So it can happen in any policy domain. And if it's done well, then it can create real efficiencies. But unfortunately, if there are some ambiguities, like we don't use exactly the same term for describing the same data, or we gather the same data but a different frequency, then at the end, in the analysis part, I see nodding hands, so it's so good because I see that you get it, that yes, it can create burden. And this is very much on the political priorities, among the political priorities of our commission as well, how to cut burden and how to do or run really practical projects about it. So in the second part, just wrapping up, because we will explore it together, we will look into what our team with experts already managed to come up with a kind of specification around regulatory reporting. We are lucky to have statistical experts here to bring their knowledge, how information runs or moves in the statistical domain. And we will also explore what new concepts like data spaces could bring for us. So this is basically a kind of wrap-up opening what to expect for today. And then let's see a bit of the technicalities. Some of you might have already spotted the QR code on the screen. So we really like to interact with you, both in the room here physically, but also remotely. And we will try to do it in a democratic manner. So everyone, please use your phones. And let's interact through this Slido channel. In this channel, there are two ways of communication. On the one hand, you can raise or post questions. So this will feed our panel discussion with the speakers. And on the other hand, you will be asked as well. So it's not an exam, more kind of getting your views, getting your feelings about what you heard from our speakers. And just to test that you got the concept and that you're ready to interact with us, we will now have some dummy intro questions that we feel and see who is in the room with us. So please launch the Slido. And Alessio will help me. Can you confirm you see the first question, which is supposed to be about your profile, meaning profile that how you define yourself as a professional, from which discipline you are coming. I'm a data scientist, I'm a policymaker, I'm an IT specialist, and I don't give more cues, so define yourself, who you are, and let's see what kind of mixed city we create today. Okay, and then can we show already the incoming results on the screen, please? No, we cannot. We should go for the second question as well. Okay, I'm reading from back, so also apparently it can move on and we see the replies at once. There is a question on your origin, from which country are you from? So we really hope that we could break the Brussels bubble and we will not only Belgian people around or people from Belgium with any nationality. Okay. Do you confirm in the room that you see something around the country? Great. Yeah. Thanks. Now we will, it's suspense. I don't know whenever we'll see the reply, but super that you are entering. You see, this could be the feeling of the people who are reporting. They are feeding data somewhere in a black box. And that's it. We will see whether it comes out something from it. Shall we move to the next question, or will we put up? Next question is about your organization. So you can be very specific. European Commission, Directorate General Digital Services, this is mine. But I cannot enter it, so don't use it. But you can be also generic. It's academia, it's private sector, it's public sector. Okay. And then I think this is the game today. We just feed information. So the next question will be that, have you ever heard about digital-ready policy making? before the 15 minutes before, basically. So when I just introduce you the term, did you come across this term somehow so far? And I think this is a yes/no question, so should be a quick one. Okay. There are some. Oh, you see the results, so it's only me who cannot see. Wow, you didn't tell me this. Okay. Then I'm not even sure that we will see together the results, but then I will have fun after the workshop. And then the last one, that those who heard about digital-ready policy making, where did you hear about it? Oh, the other group was super quick. Okay, and this must be a word cloud at the very end, so where did you hear about it? Okay, last question. Will we see the results, or I just quickly go through? Okay, then can you show me that I still read out the results?
They are still answering this. Where you heard about digital policy making is this one. Otherwise, you have to reactivate the ones you want to talk about once they have all the input.
Okay.
I can do it for you.
Okay, fine. Anyway, what was good, that you managed to enter your replies. What is not so good, that I don't know what you replied, but I let my control freakish self, and I will come up with some answers later on. And basically, I just suggest that we start the show with our speakers. And our very first speaker will be Rebecca, or Becky King, from the OECD. Becky is a policy analyst in the OECD Public Governance Directorate, working on better regulation and innovation at the Regulatory Policy Division. And she has a tendency to work in international organizations, because if I see well, she worked before in the World Economic Forum with experts to develop new, flexible methods for regulation, experimentation, and cooperation. And Becky brought back us to a very concrete and nice project resume, financed by the Commission Technical Support Instrument on the request of Denmark. So I see the key stakeholders are scattering around the room. And this specific project looked into how to prioritize existing legislation which are already due to be reviewed. So I think this is the scent. And then, Becky, please take the floor. You can come here. I think this was a bit easiest. And this is the CD.
Test the changing. There we go. Can everyone hear me fine? Perfect. All right. So thank you very much for having me here. I'm very excited to present this project to you. And as Zsofia said, there's a few people to thank for this project to have become a reality, the support of the European Commission via the TSI, Adrian in the room from DG Reform, who's had a lot of work with us. We've got Christopher from the Danish Agency of Digital Government, who have worked with us across this project to get it underway, and some great cooperation with DG Digit from Cecile and others at the early stages of this project. So what I'll talk to today is some context around why digital-ready legislation is important, particularly thinking about better regulation and how this relates to the ex-post review component of a regulatory cycle. Next, I'll provide a bit of context to the work that happened in Denmark and why it's been prioritized as a project of significance for the country. Then I'll delve into the methodology that was developed in order to prioritize legislation and provide a little bit of an outlook for implementation and expansion, how this initiative could be taken forward. So for a context of digital-ready legislation, so at the OECD, we really emphasize the importance of flexible regulatory policy cycles, and in particular, the importance of ex-post review, which I think sometimes tends to be the forgotten child of the regulatory cycle because it comes at the end. And so digital-ready legislation can have an important role for ex-post review, so considering how we can improve legislations that already exist. Firstly, in terms of incorporating these processes into existing ex-post review cycles. So this is important to build a healthy regulatory stock to ensure that the legislation that is being developed is fit for purpose. And then the second element where digital ready can come in is actually improving the processes that governments have for ex-post review. So in general, these can digital-ready legislation can increase capacity and knowledge management as it improves the kind of speed and processes that governments implement. But it's also really important for driving more data-informed decision-making. So by having digital legislation or legislation that can connect with our technologies and our systems, we can drive more data collection and then better inform both the review of legislation, but also feed in data to the processes of new legislation, thinking about regulatory impact assessments. So really bringing those two elements of regulatory policy together. And so in this context, we wanted to encourage digital-ready legislation in ex-post review, but there's an acknowledgement that this takes a lot of resources for government. Already, to prioritize ex-post review, it takes resources. So in the context of Denmark, it was thinking about how can we make this process as simple as possible? How can we ensure that the legislation that they want to look at is that of most importance, that could have the most impact? So for Denmark itself, since 2018, it has had a requirement for legislation to be reviewed against 7 digital-ready principles that it has developed. And I won't present those principles, but you can find them very easily on the Danish government's website. And following that, that process being implemented, they've currently reviewed over 1,200 primary acts of legislation and 500 plus legislative proposals that they have advised on. And so this is a very impressive achievement and number for the Danish government. Although, as kind of Christopher has pointed out to me, it's a great number, but a lot of those reviews or screenings have been on amendments to legislation, so smaller components of legislation. And there is still this large stock of over 1,600 laws that predate the entry of the digital-ready requirements. And that's laws that need to be taken into account either from that component perspective or in a holistic sense to think about how do we make it easier to implement these types of legislation. So what we did with work with the Danish government, with a group of experts, is think about what's a process that Denmark can go through to identify which of their existing legislation would benefit the most from going through this digital ready assessment. And that in itself is a mouthful, but I think I got it out. So here we developed a two-stage approach. The first, a high-level assessment and appraisal, which really focused on how can we kind of have a quicker process to dwindle down the set of legislation that we're looking at, to think about using quantitative and qualitative analysis to say, here's a first cut of legislation that we think is important to review. And then the second step that was developed was an in-depth assessment to kind of provide a reality check on this. It's like, okay, are these the legislation that are important, but also within this legislation that have been identified, how do we further prioritize them? So how do we distinguish that we want to review this legislation over that? So to go into what was developed for the first step, what's listed on the slides here is the quantitative and qualitative criteria. And these criteria were selected on the basis that they should be readily available, either from the data or from the kind of engagement of an expert who is aware of the context of this legislation. I'll go into depth a little bit in the quantitative side of things, because here what was developed was an AI model that would scrape data from the Danish government's legislative portal, so Retsinformation, and then it would apply these criteria by looking for keywords or calculations, and then output an assessment in a CSV file that anyone could use across the government. For the specific indicators here, as an example to how they're calculated, so readability, for example, we used what's called a Lix index, which basically is a different measure of the number of words that are in a legislation, the number of periods that are in a legislation, and the kind of length of words that are there. And so the LICS index takes these different elements and derives a score of readability out of 100. Then if that readability for that set of legislation or the larger legislation was 50 or over, then it was deemed to be difficult to read as kind of classified by the literature that's applied this LICS index. So it's a great proxy to think about how legislation is readable, but with this and other indicators, there's obviously always a lot of nuance to that, because this is one measure of kind of brevity of text, but good legislation isn't necessarily brief. It may need simple language, but need to have a lot of context around it to understand, which is why it's important to have the following step as well. For references to other laws, this was based on the fact that it was assumed legislation that connected to a lot of other legislation would be quite complex in terms of management and understanding. So it was identified keywords within legislative texts that that result in this referencing that the AI model could then find within the legislation and kind of flag as that's something that has references to other laws. For tech neutrality, here we identified technology-specific words such as emails, fax, telephone, which are seen as a hindrance to the potential kind of implementation of a legislation, but also things that would likely become outdated as these processes change. For review or sunset clauses, here it's assumed without these that there is no kind of programmed review of legislation that's to take place, in which case it's likely without such that the legislations might become not fit for purpose as time goes on. So specific words that reference review or sunset clauses were integrated into the model. And then finally, on the age of legislation or amendment record, here we can use the Danish government's portal, Retsinformation again, where they have a timeline of when a legislation was created or when it was last amended to see, okay, how out of date potentially is this legislation? Is it something that's been looked at recently, or is it something that's kind of very was developed a long time ago? So that's the quantitative side of things. And then on the qualitative side, I won't speak to each one, but again, all of these are aimed to be an easy mechanism to either think about what impact could the review of this legislation have, or to reflect the kind of how complex is this legislation. And for example, one there, the EU law transposition at the bottom, that there is included from the perspective of, okay, if this is something derived directly from EU law, then it's not necessarily within the Danish government's control to really be able to adjust that. So it might not be the best to prioritize for review. So taking all of these kind of criteria or indicators in one, what was proposed is that if 5 or more of these indicators were flagged, then the legislation that they were looking at would then move on to the second phase, the more in-depth assessment. So for the in-depth assessment, we have the kind of 4 key criteria that were listed here. And, you know, the aim is not to have this massive list, because the in-depth assessment is something that is kind of designed to be a more manual process and to really provide a reality check on what has been chosen in that first stage. There was also a kind of different approach of scoring applied to give some differentiation between 0 and 2. So in the example of automated case processing, if a legislation was deemed to already be able to be kind of fully digitalized or processed digitally, then it was given a score of 0. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, if there was no possibility of digital case management and everything happened to manually, it would be given a score of 2, and then in between. So maybe the other thing to say in terms of these are 4 that were chosen in the context of Denmark, but we did provide some recommendations potentially of providing broader indicators for agility, which would very much depend on, you know, the specific country's context, as well as the potential to say go back to certain indicators which were in the first stage and go more in depth in them if that was kind of deemed appropriate and important to the process at hand. So that's the methodology overall. And so what does that mean now for Denmark, and what does that mean in terms of the broader digital policymaking agenda? So for Denmark, it's, I guess, up to them now to adopt this process and to, dedicate the resources to be able to identify this legislation, and then obviously go through the process of adjusting legislation, whether specifically just focused on digital ready legislation or doing a broader ex post assessment of all of that legislation. The other thing I want to point out is kind of potential advancements to this, and I think there's a lot that can be done from this process itself, particularly around the quantification of this process that can then minimize the burden of this type of assessment. So for example, you may have governments who already have case processing connected to a specific legislation, so they can see quite easily what are the number of cases that we're managing for this legislation. Or they could have information that they're gathering from citizens through chatbots or other means on regulation itself and its implementation. So being able to have models to analyze that information and identify the sentiment that relates to it. And then there are obviously other technologies that might be able to be coupled with this that can improve the performance of the methodology. In terms of further applications, so this model is designed to apply to primary and secondary legislation, and from a quantitative perspective, it really can manage as many legislations as compute power will allow it to, and obviously with adjustment to different words and languages if it's applied in different contexts. And you can also imagine components of this legislation applying to other processes of the digital ready-making process. Like readability is something that is considered when developing new legislation. So there are elements of this process that can be applied across the spectrum of how we consider digital policy making. And then the second part is just to emphasize that this is a process that can be tailored to other jurisdictions and other countries. And so you can imagine, a case where we have a consistent process for identifying how advanced countries are in digital ready legislation, and then using this as a basis to think about how do we better support knowledge sharing and how do we better kind of grow and advance our approaches in this field. So I think that was all from me, but just to say, from the OECD's perspective, really excited about the opportunities that digital ready policy making can bring. And I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of both advancing the digitization of policy making, but also leveraging these technologies to then advance the agenda.
Many thanks, Becky. And we give a second try to this Slido thingy. So Becky prepared 2 questions to you, and now we will put them on, so it also reflects a bit her presentation. And the first question, great, you already started replying to this. To what extent does your government include digital-ready considerations in legislative design or review? And let's see, so please, both in the room, mobilize yourself and your mobile. And I see maybe remotely people replying. So quite some of you are unsure or not at all, which shows that it's still quite a new concept. And it's worth to invest in workshops like this to raise awareness about it. Okay, let's see. Still 5 people typing, now just 1. Whoa. Okay, I think we have the feeling here, at least myself, that it's unsure, not at all, and then in some countries there is InDesign or ex post review. So we will have plenty of work for the years to come. It's good. And then we have a next question. Voila. Which further work would be most valuable to advance for digital ready policy making? And I think this was multi-choice, or at least pick your preferred answer. So let's see who is here, the forerunner. So further work, for example, developing a collective language and approach for digital-ready policymaking. So basically, have the same understanding. What is it? What for? Which comes back to the awareness-raising need. So it's still something new. Great. And then we have some runner-up, like focus on integration technology in digital-ready, bring in the business, or create a business case for it and benchmarking. Okay, many thanks. First, good to see that it works. Good to see that you replies and play with us. So we are ready to move on and approach our next speaker, who will be Benedikt Liebing from Germany. Benedikt is product manager at the German government's digital service. And he joined the public service, I would say, recently, compared to dinosaurs like myself, so in 2020. And in his he has quite some ambition, because he strives to empower the government and the people mainly in the government to act and think in a digital, data-driven, service-oriented, and human-centric manner. Well done, Benedikt. And will show us Germany's work in digital-ready policymaking.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see. Start a timer so I don't run over. Hey, yeah, that's me. You already heard about me. I'm Benedikt. Nice to meet you, and it's lovely to be here and lovely to actually see some faces in real life I've only seen so far on screens, working on this topic of digital-ready policymaking. Yes, we covered that. I'm here from the digital service, Digital Service. That's the German organization that was founded 2020 to actually work for a digital Germany. So comparable to like the GDS of Great Britain. We're quite a small organization when it comes to scale of government, only 150 people of us. And normally we work on public services. So services that are digitized, digitalization is important in a way. So for example, taxes or jurisdictional services. And we also work on digital ready policy, because when working, for example, on taxes, we introduced a lot of hurdles that is actually in the policy. So the Ministry of Interior came to us and was like, well, you worked on that so far from like the implementation phase. How about coming all the way to the front of the process to actually work in the design phase to bring digital to design of the policy we are trying to implement. We do this since I joined the Digital Service, so since 2 years now, and since 1.5 years, there actually is a digital readiness check in Germany that is heavily inspired, of course, by Denmark. Heavily inspired because, yeah, Christopher and me met, I think, 2 years ago, pretty much, to the date. And we talked about it, and it was a great journey so far, and we're still introducing, trying to inspire us. That's why I also love the first answer of that thing. We need a common language about what digital ready policy is, and I might give you a glimpse what could work for that, also somehow inspired by Denmark, because that's the thing I said before. We work on both sides, and actually I will try to grab this if that's possible. We need to shape the experience that people have with governance on the one side. This is what you experience if you use a governmental service. But to do this in the right way, we need to work on what government says on the other side. And we always use those two triangles to convey the message that these need to move closer together, because the process in the middle is the translation part. And if we can get away from a translating part to a part where actually both sides talk to each other, we can get actually better governmental services. Because if you submit your property tax declaration, that is a service. You just follow up on the law, on the reform of real estate tax and validation. It's actually quite nicer in English than it was in German, because in German it was spanning the whole slide. But yeah, that tones it down a little bit. But still, this law is in its implementation a service that should be digital, and that's why we need digital-ready laws. So digital-ready policy or laws is something, and you already grasped that by now, that is not just analog policy minus written form. That's quite important, or any other analog form of digital communication. probably preaching to a choir here, but this is quite important in Germany because that's normally what we are talking to with policymakers. They're like, yeah, we've talked about that it might not have to be in a written form. You don't have to sign it. You can do that online now, but it's more than this. We need to think about the processes. So how do we get there? How do we actually get policymakers that are heavily, have heavily educated law understanding to think digital? And we do this, and this is inspired by Denmark as well, with 5 principles for digital ready policy. They're quite similar to Denmark's. We tried to only have 5 because we thought 7 was a little bit too much, but in the end it's the same, and we share a common understanding on them. And then there's 2 extras to make them actually applicable. And today I will talk a little bit more about those 2 extras and make those actionable. First extra, we need to think about the people that are affected and take their needs into account. You just heard that that's kind of thing I strive for, but it's also a thing we need to strive for in policy making. And the second thing on who's affected, it's also who's actually gonna work on the policy and how to implement it, that they also have needs, that they also need to be heard because they know how it works today and how it should work tomorrow. That's the one extra that helps to understand those 5 principles. The other extra is that we need visualizations to help policymakers to think digital, to actually think about those 5 principles to make them more actionable. And with that, we are moving to the front of the policy process. So I'm taking you to a journey where we so far don't have this written thing here. We're taking you to a journey that we actually try to work with those 2 extras before we have written texts. And how does it look? That's going to be the example, and probably going to move over there now. At the beginning of this year, a small task force of our digital service was asked to actually help with this law, which is about energy, about the whole energy net, and about how to reform it in a way that it is less burden on the administration and less burden on also the people working with those laws that are in the sectors, in the energy sector, but also in the just normal production sector. So what we did was we took policymakers and we went to actually the place where this is implemented, so to a small agency that has to process all those applications that are coming in. And we did observation and we did interviews to learn how this process works today, what are the flaws, what do we need to do to get over them. The second thing we did, we discussed heavily, guided by those 5 principles, how this digital ready law can be discussed and how solutions could be shaped so they are digital, that they actually help as well the people that are affected by it, as well as the public servants that need to follow up on it. And we always try to do this a little bit more on a printed side because that works well with senior policy. So there's like a poster with those 5 principles. And you see it's quite an official room because it was all the way high up in the hierarchy. And then we actually sat down with the teams to, you see a rule map, but actually to visualize what the policy would look like and then to connect this to the form as well as, you don't see it, well, it's somewhere here, to the policy itself. So to see how it would affect what we are writing. And it was not only one visualization, it was quite a lot. For example, also just a simple process diagram, also highly abstracted for the higher levels of the hierarchy, but also toned down and really in the detail for the lower levels of hierarchy with all the problems we had today and all the possibilities we could see that are enabled by digital readiness. And in the end, we had, that's like the person that we worked with, we had this really nice quote. She said, "The thorough analysis of the enforcement process has helped us to better understand the interplay between the regulation and the administration and thus to shape the digital enforcement of it." And this is quite nice because it's like the first time she thought about her way of working in a way that she can actually connect the regulatory policy to the administration, and to the implementation. So this is what we aim and strive for with the digital readiness check in Germany. And as a little bit bonus, and I'm not done here, it's quite amazing that we now have, this is the policy document, how it goes to our legislative bodies, and amended to that, we have actually visualizations, which is not the first time that it's happening. It happened before. It actually happens now quite a lot of times now, but it's now happening, and this is also a positive thing for the for the people that actually sit in the bodies to understand the policy and not only read texts. So, what did we get done? We moved from a retention obligation to from a submission obligation to a retention obligation. Because if you hand something in digital, it makes no sense that you print something out to hand it in what you have digital anyways. And it's not even checked by the administration because they don't have time for that, they don't see the value in it. So if we need it, we can get it. It's, you know, application to have it there with you. We removed quite a lot of unnecessary complex links to processes that are not needed because they are not followed up on, because they're just old overlay that has been in the policy. We advanced actually the online application so that it will be mandatory from, I think, the next year on, which was an ask of the implementation body. And we enabled a partial automation, not a complete automation, but a partial automation by getting rid of some constructing logical problems in the policy. So as you can see, there was policy before that. We just worked on amendment to a policy to make that better, because that was, well, actually they changed a little part of the policy beforehand, and then they figured out they need to make it better, because otherwise they will not be able to follow up on the implementation. So, zooming out, I've told you, we're working on the digital check since 2 years. 5 minutes left, that's perfect. Since 2 years. And we reached quite a thorough utilization. About 82% of all laws that passed in the 1.5 years that it is mandatory now actually use it. This is mandatory, so they have to use it, but still 82%. That's quite a good number for, you actually see the most actual numbers is 86% from the screenshot, but that's quite a good number because there are laws that are just pressed through parliament, that are pressed through the whole legislation process. They won't be able to do any checks, either post or pre the whole work. It doesn't just work. So 82% is pretty good. We see that now every third policy project hands in visualizations to the National Regulatory Council. That's the agency in Germany that actually tests if those digital checks are done the right way, which is good, but the quality of those can be better. It is one of the better ones that actually follows notation and can be readable, but most of them are still like 3 boxes with some colors. So we need to get better, but still, they are visualizing. And for that, in 2024, we are focusing on creating an environment to increase the quality and to provide tailor-made recommendation and tools. And how do we do that? Well, we are starting to actually digitize the digital check, which so far was just a PDF. And we do this with, you just run through some questions. We do this because we want to get here. We want to get here to the result of the preliminary check that actually tells you if you are applicable to do a whole digital check, or if you need to maybe just think about it a little bit more if you're applicable, because we actually believe that you are probably applicable in most of the cases. And then we're gonna tailor those next steps to the answers you gave. And if you're unsure, which is also a possibility in those in this form you just seen, we'll actually talk to you, because to get the policy makers to think digital is still a process that is ongoing, and it's a mindset change. So you need to do it in a human way, and you need to actually make them feel the positive sides of it. So, what can you take away from this? First of all, visualizing policy helps in many different contexts, and policy drafters will realize this when they try it out. They love this. They actually went back, and the next policy project they did, they also visualized, and that wasn't with us. So they actually learned something and took something away from it, which made their work better and more digital ready. Introducing the views of implementation actors and the intended recipients is key. So talk to the people that actually need to implement this, that actually are the ones that will be somehow affected by the policy. This influences policy, and actually it's something that we should do a lot more in government, because we kind of are in our small little bubble and don't, well, forget about the people that we are actually doing it for. And yeah, creating a shared language and foundation for principles is valuable. Well, we have that common in Denmark. Becky just followed up on that, and we've seen a lot of adaptations in the EU as well as in other countries. And please come to talk to us, talk to Christopher, talk to the whole Digit team. It's amazing to be in a conversation about it, and it actually helps to have the common understanding. Also in your hierarchy systems, because it helps you to make the point why this is important. And last but not least, starting is the hard part. Make it as easy as possible. That's why we try to, well, that's why we started with like the 5 principles and really toned down PDF version of it, because it will need tools, it will need support, it will need training, it will need a lot of information about what's there and what you can use. And it will obviously need tailor-made recommendations, because it is about processes, so everything will be different. And you probably also need task forces to follow up on the really problematic things. But it will take time to change this, and it will time to change habits and minds. So you need to start today, and that's the hard part, to actually get somewhere tomorrow. And that's it. Thanks for this possibility.
Many thanks, Benedict. And again, quick Slido question. Yes, I have a mobile. Okay, I have a thingy. Wow, I'm well equipped. I would prefer the mobile. But anyway, let's see. In your view, which of the following do you think is most effective in bridging the gap between policy design and implementation? So basically to run digital-ready policy making. And we have options like building a multidisciplinary team, having high-level sponsorship, developing visualization tools for analyzing business processes, or having direct access to guidance and tailored advice. And so far, with 17 replies, the multidisciplinary team is leading, but I see sponsorship and visualization tools slowly also catching up. So it's super good that the multidisciplinary mantra is spreading. If you let me share my experience, though, in the Commission, I cannot undervalue the importance of sponsorship and mandate. So with Cecile, we had the privilege to get in touch with Christopher, who became Europe's ambassador or leading person and face of digital-ready policy making 7 years ago. So not 2 years ago, but 7 years ago. But we are reaching in the Commission the point to mainstream digital-ready policy making only now. And it's basically the turning point, because we seem to now get the political mandate. And now we really hope that and feel that things will speed up. Though we already did quite some work on guidance, trainings, calling for multidisciplinary teams. So now I'm a little bit biased, but I cannot convince people yet, because it's 60%. So of course, this should be a kind of matrix, all elements built together. And
I replied high-level sponsorship.
Okay, Cecile, who haven't heard Cecile, and Alessio, so those who don't have mandate feel that it's needed. But with that, let's move to the last tandem speakers of this session. So we here are lucky enough, still staying with Germany, but a bit from academia. So I have Felicitas Löffer and also Professor Marianne Mach with me. And Felicitas, starting with Felicitas, she's a technical expert in the e-government and IT department of the Thuringian Ministry of Finance in Erfurt. And she has a background in computer science, as well a PhD in the same field from University of Jena. And I suspect that this is the link between her and Marianne, because Marianne, she is a research scientist at the Competence Center for Digital Research and the chair of Distributed Information System in the very same university. And she has a computer science master's as well as a degree in mathematics, but today she brings represents as head of the Open Design of Digital Administrative Architecture Working Group, which body has 3 running joint research projects at the moment, all targeting digitalization of administration in Germany. and very specifically finding the path from a legal text to its implementation as a digitalized service. And if I'm not mistaken, we will now really step in slowly closer to the technical fields, because we will hear about knowledge graphs and how to make it happen. So ladies, the floor is yours. This is where you can move the slides. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It works? You hear me? Oh, fine. Thank you very much, but I have no title. I have studied twice, but I have no title till now. Yes. Let us start. We want to present our way to digitalize public services with knowledge graphs. Yes. I start with a concept, and Felicitas will overtake the more practical part of our presentation. And I'm the head of the OpenDVA working group, and we want to we research the way from the legal base to digitalized service is a cycle. And I believe we have a more technical view of digital-ready policy making. Nobody wants to digitalize back paper process. Nobody wants to reinvent the wheel every time. But we have to digitize it in compliance with legal resources. And why it is so important? If we do that, we are able to detect changes in the laws. Yes, and as working group, we analyzed two methods for digitized laws. The one is FIM, and the second is rule mapping. We saw it on the last presentation already, and we are working with the municipality is the city of Jena. We digitalized two services: the basic income support of job seekers. We had no opportunity, we had to do it, and we digitalized with a partner with knowledge tools. And we analyze it, how we can do it better, on a better way and on a more sufficient way. And in Germany, we have a governance and 60 federal states and a lot of municipalities. One is the city of Jena, and each level makes laws and adapts the laws. And it's very complicated. And therefore, there is a method called FIM, Federal Information Management, that analyzes the laws and gives structured informations for services, processes, and data fields till now. And with the rule mapping method, we get the decisions in our project. And in our projects, we analyze the law for the basic income, yes, and we produce such good information, structured information, that we can digitalize it with the help of knowledge graphs and with no-code, low-code platforms. That was the task we get. Yes, no-code, low-code platforms are platforms that can be used to digitalize services without knowledge. Without programming knowledge, yes, like Lego. Yes, okay. Yes, our vision is, now we start at the analyzing of the law, get structured informations, get a described, semantically described structure, we get a knowledge graph, and then we can digitalize the service. And then we can not only provide information for several stakeholders, and we can collect informations from the enforcement for better legislation. And in the future, I hope, with our start and with our base, we have a so good structure that the legislation process will be in more better way. The base, the knowledge graph base, is a good base. For a better legislation, for better policy making. And in the future, we will not produce text, we will produce structures and adapt the structures and then produce with the methods text. Okay, let us start. At first, we have to analyze the legal base with FIM, and we want to get described services, process information as a BPNN format, and data fields on each process step. Let us start with FIM. FIM is will be in the 1st January of 2017 an application of the Regulation Council in Germany, and the 3 pillars are the standards in the federal information management. And it's a translation from a legal language to a language for the enforcement, for the citizen, and for the companies. And the first one is Zsofia. It describes the service itself. The second one is Process. It describes the process as in BPNN format. And the third one is Datenfeld, and it describes the data field on each step, process step, till now. In the future, we will have Rule with rule mapping to describe decisions. Okay, let us start. In the all we made it with our basic income from Jena. It's a part of the law in German, and we try to find several words of categories. We try to find a main actor, a condition, a result receiver, and so on. We get tasks, we get a list of tasks, we get an ordered list of tasks, and then we have perhaps a process. And yes, and we use AI methods, rule-based, large language models, DeepL methods. We develop a first tool for the method experts. They have to create such FIM informations. And this is the first one, the described service, normally in PDF format. You get informations about the legal base with identifiers and the full text description. And this is a part of a process. The process contains also reference activity groups. 2 of them are condition with or without room with scope. And if the law is good enough, we can not only describe the data fields on the belonging process step, we could say which certificate we need. And in the future, in 2030, I believe, we will have a good description of our registers. Then I know from which register I get the certificate. I hope. And these are the data fields. It's also in XML format. And here you see the colleague has developed here our certificate. And in the future, we go to the register on this place. Yes, this is rule mapping. Rule mapping knowledge tools. You can model decisions also with DMN, but it's a BPNN format, and you need a lot of vaults for doing that. And this is a better way to do it and to see and what you have to change. And rule mapping analyzes not the law. It begins at the end, at the notifications that the administration should do to the citizen, and think what decisions it has to make, and then I get this decision tree. And knowledge tools has digitized the service, and you get the notification at the end if you made it. Now we are in the cycle. We have analyzed the law, we get the structured information, and now we want to show you our knowledge graph. We have made a process-based ontology, filled it with instances of our services, and have a knowledge graph, and has not only a process-based knowledge graph, also a knowledge graph for our data fields for each steps. And on the next slide we see it, and the blue buttons you see, you have the service, you have the process, a process step, you have the legal base, our reference activity groups, decision with or without a scope, you have the main actors, the data fields, and the documents you need. And then, Felicitas.
Yeah. So actually you see here the ontology, so not the final knowledge graph, but the ontology which is necessary to create the knowledge graph. So, and as you can see, as Marianne mentioned, the blue fields here show you the new fields we had to model. However, we also didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we reused ontologies. The blue fields and the purple fields are the ontologies we reused for provenance and for business information. And we also linked, next slide. So we also linked our classes to the classes from the SEMIC core vocabularies. So we also linked the legal resource, for instance, and the service to the public service or the organization, the evidences. So it's also linked to the SEMIC core vocabularies to be more interoperable. Also the ontology is published. There's also a paper, so can also cite the paper. The ontology is the base we need for a knowledge graph, and it's kind of a top-level ontology. So as you can see, it's really not domain-specific. Yeah. And now, how to produce a knowledge graph? You need these data ingest pipelines. You need the actual data in the knowledge graph, and this is what we did here. This was the manual step. So that means we take this X process files, as Marianne mentioned, this BPMN files, and we link them with some code, which is also publicly available with our ontology, to get this mini knowledge graph out of it. Yeah. So here it was a manual process, but now you can see we have the specific public service, our basic income support for job seekers, which is now linked with the individual process steps, and the process steps now are based on specific legal resources. And this is the human view, human-like graphs. However, a machine doesn't like this picture. A machine likes code. And so in the back end, the system now would create the Sparkle query to get the legal resources for a specific process step. Yeah, so now we are able to get this context knowledge for the machine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we also extended the ontology. This is our new version. It's still work in progress, not fully published, partially published, this very first version for the data fields. Because the first version was focused on the processes. Now this is an extension for the data fields. Here again, the red buttons or the red bubbles are the ones we have to create completely new for data fields. The blue ones are coming from our previous version with the processes, and the green ones are also coming from an existing ontology. And however, you can see even data fields can get very complex, in particular for decisions and rules. It had to be completely new modeled, and it still needs to undergo a quality check. So this is why I said it's a first version. However, we also wanted to show you work in progress. Yeah. And again, as I said, for the knowledge graph, you need these data ingest pipelines. Yeah, you need kind of tools to link the ontologies to the actual data. In the first step, we did this manually. Now we're also working on tools. So this is also a prototype, not published yet. But in Germany, we have national APIs for all the data fields and all the processes. Currently, the API for data fields is publicly available. The API for processes is still under development. And for our prototype, we added the API for the data fields. So you are able to select the data field from that API. Here I select the driver license, and then you can export that XML file. So data fields are also published in XML files. You can select here the kind of conversion you want to do. You can convert the file to either a no-code, low-code platform. This platform Marianne mentioned, but you don't need any coding knowledge. Or you can also convert it to different semantic format, JSON-LD or Turtle or RDF, XML. And also internally at the university, it works that you also push it to a Fuseki server, which is a semantic, a triple store for semantic data. And So here we have also first tools for really creating a knowledge graph, which you need, because otherwise it's a manual process, which is, yeah, time consuming. Yeah, and now when we look at our circle, we are now here having all these 3 building blocks. We are able to better digitize and more easily digitize public services. This is our vision. And as Marianne also mentioned, in the future, we hope that our puzzle pieces will go back to legislation, that not the law is written first, but that we have the building blocks first, and then the law becomes written. Yeah. Thank you very much. Also, the publications are available, and we publish that at different scientific conferences, also public administration conferences, and yeah, thank you.
Now join us in the panel, yes. As well as I asked Becky and Benedict to take their high chair. Before that, though, while you find your place, we have still a question from Felicitas and Marianne to you in Slido, so we can put it on. What data models, data standards do you use for the digitalization of public services? So it's a multi-choice, and it's good to see that SEMIC is there. Good answer. But it's just 3 answers yet, so please warm up. Okay, national data model is accepted. Go for it. Let's wait a few answers to stream in. Okay, it's not changing. You are less active now, but let's see the next question. What shared vocabularies or knowledge graphs do you use for the description of public services? And here, Eurobox, so we stay in the European resources. No vocabularies at all. Second place, other, mysterious, and Wikidata. Okay, so with that, let's use the time we have for some questions and answers. So the team will as well show us the incoming questions from the audience, which means you as well in the room. So if you have questions, just to spare the time of running around these magic microphones, please instead type your question through Slido, okay? And before picking here a question, and you can also vote, so you have time now to vote and pick a question. I already have an opening question to you, because it stuck with me what Becky said when presenting the Danish case, that you already was thinking what to share with others, other administrations or other countries. So I would like to give a kind of general exercise to each of you, also refreshing the minds of the audience, that from your project, from your presentation, which is the key asset you think it's really something reusable by others. And if you recommend to do so, maybe what are the specificities to consider for other administrations? Like, I like that Benedict referred to the German language specificity to be quite long. So already I thought of your index in the readability of legal text, the number of characters and lengths of sentences. Wow, so it could be already a specificity of national languages. But may I start with you, Becky, and then just follow the order? You need to pick the mic. Yes. And let's hear. So from this case, I think yes,
they saw that. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I kind of started talking to it in the presentation, but maybe just to say, I think in terms of any scalability of these things, especially, you know, there's some countries like Germany, Denmark that are really leading on this thing, but I still think there's a broader approach in terms of building up the business case for this type of investment that needs to be developed. And these types of examples that we're seeing here today provide a good flavor in terms of how this can be developed. But I think there's a lot of governments from a first perspective of really needing to have the case, or public policymakers to have the case to build the high-level support that you talked about earlier, in terms of saying this is exactly the benefits that we can have. I know it will take a lot of resources, but then exactly from the perspective of connecting the data to technologies and all of these processes, then I think that's kind of how, in the first instance, we'll build broader adoption. And then, you know, from Denmark's case, it's good Germany kind of leverage the digital ready principles. So we need to kind of take these efforts that have been happening, and each country might tailor it to its own context, but really to keep ideally a consistent high level thresholds and approach that means that each system can talk to each other.
Thank you. And can pass to Benedict, yes.
Yeah, I can only agree. Yeah, reuse, copy proudly. We copy proudly from Denmark and collaborate with the people that are there. I can only stress this more. What else? I think it depends from country to country. For example, Germany is, as just mentioned, we have 16 states, federal states. And we actually try to anticipate this with our digital check and try to be really public, vocal about it. So we wrote blog posts, we answered questions. We're always open to like all kinds of feedback, and we now see the adoption of the principles in those federal states as well. So this makes a little bit of interoperability, or ensures a little bit of interoperability. When it comes to the methods, I think that's kind of the thing you need to adapt to your country, because, for example, we have FIM. We have the idea of FIM. We're still like working on the implementation of FIM, but this is really a really good first step if you have a model of your policy already that you can build up on. This is great if it's there. So you need to probably adapt. I would probably still go with multidisciplinary teams and visualizations, because that just works in software development, as we all know. But how those flavors then turn to your country, that's probably something you can adopt to, see what's there and see what you can build up on.
Okay, and ladies already implementing the act.
Okay. Yeah, I can also only confirm, Benedict and Becky, that copy proudly, do not reinvent the wheel new, look what's out there and reuse other people's idea. I think this is really, really important, and and I would also like to be happy if we can start looking for or thinking about common standards, and common methodologies. I think it's fine if the national member states have their own technical issues or their specific topics. However, we need the same methodology or standards, the same vocabulary, and I think this makes digitization then easier.
Yes, and we have to we have to look in the countries and working together. And in each country, I will find a main actor and result receiver, and I can use Danish methods, and we have to combine it.
Okay, thank you. And then I think there are quite some interrelated questions here on the top of the screen, and maybe it was also inspired by your presentation at the very end, how this all work you done can feed eventually policy making, because the first question asks, would it make sense to create modular policy components, such as standard clauses or policy options in digital-ready policy making? And someone already said yes, because they asked, what are benefits and challenges of creating such a library of reusable digital-ready policy building blocks? So, for example, could you imagine that when drafting policy, there could be already some standard clauses, some standard templates to reuse, for example, to describe a process? So if we manage to already model so well or legal acts and have a kind of vocabulary or examples of such processes.
Yes, and I would say it makes sense to have building blocks. Yes, of our processes. In Germany, nobody colored the laws, the whole law, because in Germany there are pattern laws. Yes, and this will be modeled, and this is I can download, and such things make sense. Really sense.
Okay,
yes.
So it was really specific on standard clauses and policy options, but also in general, beyond, maybe I extend the question in another direction, beyond the tool of business process modeling, what other incentives or toolings you see that can help policymakers to apply digital-ready policy making? Do you have ideas or experiments with other elements, maybe?
The visualization of rule mapping, it's one part. It's a good part for the legislation. In Germany, they work with it, with the rule mapping. And they are interesting also to film, to combine it for the process. And if you have more information from knowledge graphs, it will make.
Yeah, I would add, start where your policymakers are at. We just, like last year, we launched a small tool finder, because one of the most questions we got asked is, I want to visualize something, but what kind of tool do I use? And we have 16 states. We also have quite a number of ministries, and those are all kind of independent when it comes to tooling. So we have I don't remember the number, but it's a vast number of software tools that actually help you visualize. So rule mapping, and with there's software for that, would be one of them. So we created a really small decision support model that based on like 3 questions and gives you a tool that you can start off with and some recommendations how to actually approach it. So it makes sense to standardize such things, because you don't need to train in 16 tools, maybe just 3 or 4. But again, yeah, start where users are at. So kind of bridge the gap between there and where we want to be at. Yeah, that's my answer to that.
What is also necessary is a common language, and therefore we need these standard vocabularies. Yeah, what is for instance in Germany we had different laws for children. So what is a child? When is a child a child? Yeah, so all these definitions, it makes really sense when it comes to data, and so really need also a common language, a common understanding.
Yes, and we can describe it in which law we handle a child.
Yeah.
I like that you got enthusiast in the funnel and the micro is just, but this is also, I can share in the commission, we have also the same thinking. Yes, for example, we have a little component with title digital ready drafting. So what can help the drafters, and exactly this kind of closed list of specific terms is among them to avoid creating or inventing new terms for the same idea, and already a bit hinting in the regulatory reporting direction, which we will cover in the next, after the coffee break. Also would be nice, for example, when a drafter starts creating a new regulatory reporting obligation, that already there will be some assistance by machine to show, watch out, you want information in this domain, but there are already these 3 existing reporting obligations, which are, by the way, linked to these existing IT systems which gather these data sets. Are you sure you want to create a 4th one, or can you just address the gap? So we are thinking in this direction. We are dreamers, but I see that the audience is dreamer, because if you see the first question, does it exist a digital ready policymaking maturity model already, or should it be? Let's see. What do you think about that?
I mean, I don't know if one exists. Maybe that does, but I think it's a good idea, because, I mean, it's starting from just like, what are the basic elements of a system? What classifies as maturity? Is there kind of a pathway that could be spelled out, where it's like, you know, in best practice, the first thing that you need is your principles laid out. Then you need to be thinking about, okay, to what extent does this already exist within our system? How can we leverage it? Maybe then it's building in the processes, the knowledge maps, and that type of thing. And so I don't think it exists, but to have this common process that either those who are on their journey or those who haven't started their digital journey can look at and say, okay, this is what I need to do. And then it goes back to, I think I commented about like benchmarking in my presentation. It goes back to then I can see kind of who's advanced, not from a kind of like bad comparative perspective, but to see, okay, what lessons can I learn from them?
Please.
Yeah, maybe just adding to that, or maybe another thought, another side to it. We're talking about technology, if we're quite honest. And I don't see technology really maturing, it's just moving. So I guess we can have a maturity level of where we are at this whole path, but I don't really see that we'll mature digital ready policy in itself. Christopher is having a thought on it. I love it. Yeah, let's have a discussion about it. I think we need to like the process to get there, but I don't know if technology will ever stop, so we can reach a maturity on it. I don't know. Oh, I love your thoughts on that. We'll have a coffee chat about it.
But Christopher, if you have a point, just grab a microphone. It's also valid for audience. We get flexible. So
I really don't want to dominate this discussion. I'm really keen to hear your contributions. But just one thought. from our perspective, I mean, we started a little bit earlier, and now we can see the idea catching on. And for us, it's like free Christmas every time a new institution embarks on this journey, because they add a little thing that they need in particular, and then we can see, look, for us as well. So from that perspective, we can see it's maturing, but you know, growing or developing or whatever. So there is some movement in the tool set or whatever.
Okay. Many thanks. Cecile, voilà.
As we are allowed, I will say that yes, I think that in the next part of the in this next session, you will see that technology is maturing, and I don't know, Monica, if you want to add a word on this, or
Okay, but it was enough.
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
It's on, yes.
I'm wondering what is the role of a judiciary system in your model? Because the judge must interpret the law and must also to infer with the policies case by case. So I'm wondering what is the input coming from the case law, the judgments, from the constitutional court, from this part of the society?
In Germany, we have to digitalize over 10,000 services, and there exists one for all principle. It don't really work till now, partially, and therefore they produce a film methodology. Yes, the levels, the government makes laws, and in the principle, they have to produce such film informations. That is the principle. And for all others that they want to reuse or adapt the law in a lower level. Yes, and therefore for a good digitalization, I need a structure for digitalization, and that is film. It answers the question a little bit?
Because the constitutional court can change some interpretation of the workflow, of the process, and have a great impact. So the judiciary system is actually divided in principle, but entering the debate day by day, interpreting one part of the graph of the process that is not applicable or applicable in different way. So my comment, I'm coming from philosophy of law, and I'm a computer scientist. I have the two. My comment is pay attention, because also the judiciary system can change the workflow with a strong interpretation, say, since now we interpret because the society is changing and evolving. So inside of it, exactly in the cycle, it is interesting also to have a feedbacks from the judiciary system, obviously in a different level and different way.
It's only a first step, and it's not only one process we build. We build a basic, in German called Stammprozess. I don't know the real basic process. It's a basic structure. Yes, it's at the first step. You have to make an application. You have to look, have I automated the decision? I am on the right administration, and so on. And then I have to make a decision, yes, or I have to bring to get information from another administration, and so on. That is FIM in the first step. That is a very rough structure, not more. Yes, and then I have to fill it with information. That is called, if I have 2 or 3 municipalities, I get a reference process. Yes, I fill it with informations. And the third step is a local process. Then I have the printer and whatever in the process steps. There are several steps, but in 15 minutes it's too short.
But I think it's interesting to take that because we also had a few months ago in the Madrid SEMIC conference discussion of law as code, and for example this coded representation of a legislation, what its value, and I think we tended to agree that it could be kind of reference implementation, but not with a legal value, because indeed, if we create these business process models for implementation, it will not stand on their own before a court. I would like just really quickly address the first point, because it's more for the European level, so what we are doing around digital-ready policymaking, and as I hinted, yes, we are advancing because finally, with this commission, outgoing commission and incoming commission, we seem to finally have a mandate. It's still in making, but one of the secret weapons was here the Interoperability Europe Act and this specific interoperability assessment. Yeah, because it gives a legal mandate, which finally even our administration in the House acknowledged and sought and agreed that digital-ready policy making is the best process to cater for it. So this really brings us in a very interesting and exciting pathway. And also coming back to this maturity model, I fully agree with Becky that some kind of onboarding package for everyone with where to start, what are the basics would be super important, maybe avoiding this pressure of competition and how mature you are, I'm better than you. So more bringing it in this spirit of learning from each other, what we do today here, and where I also invite you, especially those of you who represent somehow member states, that join forces, because we would like to create a kind of network, knowledge network among member states on digital-ready policy making. So of course, Benedict, Germany, and Christopher are already almost with us, I hope. And we also have a community, by the way. So those of you who are not necessarily representing an administration, we have a digital-ready policymaking community still using the pseudonym of Better Legislation for smoother implementation. And then maybe just close the tour with one of the questions I saw here on this shaking up your organization. I'm just looking, what was the one? Exactly, this is examples of how digital-ready legislation break down existing services silos beyond levels of government to completely redesign services, processes, and organizational responsibilities. I told you that we are dreamers, and this is super good. So do you see some examples where maybe this multidisciplinary work, maybe this new way of thinking changed a bit of the traditional way of lawmaking in your organizations?
I can start. I don't have a good example yet. I hope. That's actually the dream, to completely redesign services and completely change how we collaborate with the whole different levels of government. Well, the example I made from the energy law is a little bit in this direction, but it's still ways to go, to be honest. Because yes, we talked to all the people that are implementing it, that are there from the lower levels of government, but still they were at the table, but it's still kind of a hierarchically system that somehow overrules some of the ideas that are there that would probably work better. So not yet, but I would love to see it, and I'm pretty sure if we keep on working on that, it might be possible in someday.
Okay, I think that this could be a good closing word here. Also, I know for me, this is super exciting in digital-ready policy making, that as I think almost every of us mentioned, it's a mindset shift, kind of changing how we work. It also calls for kind of innovative approaches, new way of even multidisciplinary team. I admit it's so easy to preach it, go and do it. I have now a multidisciplinary team. Quite a challenge to speak the same language, to understand each other. So we need some ideas, we need some new working methods, how to get the understanding. And then we haven't even touched about stakeholder consultation and how to find our users. So it's a lot of innovation here and a lot of prospect. I think that we keep this topic on the SEMIC conference agenda for the years to come. And then, voila, we see back now the results from the beginning of the session. So we see that today, most of you were said that you come with policy consultant background, but we have semantic, we have project management, economists, so, and awesomeness, this is great, I like this one. Take this with you. Country, yes, we have our speakers from Germany, we will see Spain and Denmark, but we are really covering nicely. India, thanks for being here, Japan, super, Australia, so we go worldwide. And then next question was your organization. So yeah, mainly public sector, but it's super good to have academia, private sector, and the mysterious other. And then if we move on, most of you heard about it, but we still have a little bit of, but welcome the new ones. So great that you appeared and showed up. And finally, where did you hear about it? European Commission. Oh, it was quick. If you can go back. And it's too back. But I saw European Commission. So, but not only European Commission. If we move one more, and the last one. Here, stop, please. Yes. So Brussels network works, SEMIC. So SEMIC has this leverage. But my closing word to you that, don't forget to come back after the coffee because we have really interesting stuff for you. And then just become our ambassadors. So this is what I learned from Benedict, that you just put the implementers in the beginning of the process. So power yourself, implementers in the room, and dare to come in and go into your policy making and say, hi, I have some ideas for you. So thank you, and let's see each other in half an hour.
I see that the coffee was refreshing and that you are having fun. But we need to start again. I'm sorry for you. And so for all the 1,000 people, I'm glad that finally you can survive with a cup of coffee, because at the end of the lunch, I was seeing faces very, very disappointed. Oh, where is the coffee? so now I hope you're good. So now I will be moderating together with Alessio the second part of the second session of this workshop. And in fact, you have seen that the first part was more dedicated to the, I will say, the legal and organizational layer, not drilling too much into the data aspects. And the second part will be focusing on the relation between the legal layer and the data aspects. And we will first, as Zsofia already introduced, continue, but this I will let Alessio explain the progress of our project that we presented already last year. And later we will have a very interesting presentation also from from statistic activities that in fact lead the policy as well. So I will make this link. And last, because we will see the link also with data spaces. So now, Alessio, can you please introduce the next project?
So this, so the first part of the second part of the workshop is going to focus on the SORTIS project, which is the acronym of the Study on Regulatory Reporting Standards. And for this, I would welcome to the stage to Professor Ashwin Itto from the University of Liège, and later to and later to Professor Monica Palmirani from the University of Bologna. And this project, just to give a little bit of context about it, was started because we identified the regulatory reporting phenomenon as a cross-cutting phenomenon across the policymaking cycle. And it was ideated, I think, in 2022, more or less. It was the initial thoughts were given to that. And then after some months, there was an announcement by the European Commission on the strategy for competitiveness, and with an increased political attention for reducing the administrative burden to small and medium enterprises. So please, Ashwin, I leave you the floor, and thank you very much.
And welcome to everyone. Thank you for the invitation, Cecile and Alessio. So in the previous session, you have heard a lot about digitalization, legal semantics, and so on. And now we'll try to make it a bit more concrete, just to build up on what our colleagues have told us earlier. So I will speak about the use case known as SORTIS, in which we try to formalize or to semantify legal text. Right, so maybe I will need a... I will maybe to use that one, if it's possible, yes. And a controller for the slides. Okay.
You want me to...
Oh, okay,
yeah. It's that one, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Now I'm all set. Yep. I do work in AI, so don't you worry.
You just need to point it towards there.
So, yeah.
It's the central button.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so this is the agenda for today. I will try to describe the problem, but you know it better than I do. Discuss the business motivation, then describe two ways in which we have tried to address this problem of trying to semantify legal text. Our colleague said that technology might be a bottleneck, or it's not mature enough. And we will see indeed that somehow technology has its limit, but we can always find a solution out of that. Discuss the limitations, of course, and I will give a generic conclusion on which methods I think is the best, and you would see that none of the methods actually work quite well. Right, so this is a kind of legal text with which you are more or less familiar. And you can see from that piece of legal text, we have a reporting obligation. This reporting obligation contains a few elements or entities that are important to us. You have, firstly, a deadline, a date, an addresser, an addressee, one or more addressees, and the result of an action, such as submit a report on the issue of something. The aim is now to try to first detect this reporting obligation, this clause from such text, and then extract those entities one by one, such that from this unstructured representation, we can populate an ontology, which my colleague will elaborate later on. Right, so we start from here, extract these entities, and then link them to classes of this ontology for many different reasons: to automate business processes, for faster compliance and reporting, for more streamlined business processes, for automating these business processes, and so on and so forth. As you can imagine, this task is extremely challenging because human language by its nature is intricate, is completely difficult to understand. We all have different ways to express the same thing. Furthermore, and I think Zsofia spoke about it before briefly, in those reporting obligations, the entities are actually optional. That is, you may or may not have an addressee, you may or may not have a deadline. So you cannot rely on fixed rules to detect those entities from the text. And those are, again, two examples of reporting obligations. You can see how complex they are to read for human beings, and for machines it's even more challenging. So the first thing that we had to do is to find out how those who crafted these legislations expressed the act to report something. To do that, we use a technique known as word embeddings, which is based on vectors of words. And we said, well, we take the vector of the word to report and find out which of the words are most similar or closest to that word called to report. And in the end, you get vectors like that, which says, well, report is here. That's the vector of the word report. And those words here will have a similar meaning as the verb to report, because the distance between those vectors and the vector of the verb to report is very small. So we can assume that they are quite similar, and indeed makes sense. You have inform, communicate, notify, publish, disclose, and so on. Semantically, they are similar to report. So first step done, we know how people express report, the act to report. Then we looked for these obligations in the text, those clauses that contain the verb report, the verb disclose, the verb publish, and so on and so forth. And then came the most complex part of it, that is to detect exactly the entities. We are starting from scratch, so we cannot do supervised machine learning. We have to do completely unsupervised machine learning. What we did then, we said, well, we know that which verbs express to report, the act of reporting. For each of these clauses that we detect, for each of these obligations, we derive their syntactic parse tree using a syntactic parser. So you have the root verb here. Just to recall your high school grammar, you have a nominal subject, you have a complement, and so on and so forth. Right, so what we did in our approach, once we get such a tree, we made some rules. We said, well, the addresser, the one who reports something, is always the subject. The addressee, the one who receives the information, well, it was a bit more tricky, because you can see in that example, maybe in the next slide I will have it. that example, the addressee is a sequence which is that long. Prepositional object, positional object, positional object, and so on and so forth. And it goes on and on and on. And the addressee is not distinguishable from the result of this reporting obligation. They have the same syntactic structure. P object, P object, P object, P object, P object, P object. Even here a conjunction because you have the parliament and the council. So it gets extremely messy to go through such kind of data structure. To extract those entities actually. To extract that this part is the result of the action and this part is actually the addressees. You don't know when to start and when to stop, basically. It gets extremely challenging. And this method is quite limited because it's too complex, and more specifically, it's not scalable. As soon as the sentence structure changes, you have to change the way how you go through the syntactic parse tree, and it gets in an infinite number of possibilities. You cannot proceed in that manner, I would think. What we did then, we adopted an approach which is somehow a bit controversial. We said, well, let's use a large language model. We did not use OpenAI because we believe it's still a bit closed source or not enough open for us. So we use Llama 3, which is available from Meta, actually. It was quite lightweight, and it performs well on different tasks. And to use Llama 3, we use what is known as instruction-based prompting. So we tell Llama what to do exactly. And we adopted a paradigm known as few-shot learning. That is, I will explain to you now. So this is the instruction part. We tell Llama that you are a virtual annotator. For each sentence that we'll give to you, you have to annotate the addressee, addresser, date, and so on and so forth. And then we show to Llama a few examples. This is what is known as few-shot prompting. This is one example we gave to Llama. This is a sentence, and we want the output to be exactly like that. And I hope you can realize the ease of working now with Llama, with simple prompts, compared to having to traverse or to parse all these syntactic dependencies trees. Just a few examples, give it to Llama, and that's it. And during our testing, it worked quite well. Then we gave it this sentence without any help and asked it to annotate this sentence, what is the addressee, addresser, deadline, and so on. And it came up with quite a reasonable output, which looked good to us. That seems very promising until you reach this example. Why? Because Llama starts to hallucinate. Llama put a new or here, so the address is already wrong. He says it's also or a different entities, whereas in the text, there is no mention of that or anywhere. So ease of use, very easy, straightforward, but then you will end up into trouble if people start to use such output to do their compliance or to add to their reporting obligations. So the Llama approach has also a number of additional challenges. Firstly, you have to look for good examples to show it first, select them, handpick them very carefully. Of course, you have the issue of explainability. It's an extremely huge model. You cannot understand how it takes its decision. And for other LLMs, cost might be also a problem because you have to pay via the API. It's not expensive, but over long-term use, then the cost might also explode. So to conclude my overall speech, what I would like to say is, well, this task of converting reporting obligations into a more semantical format or an ontology is extremely challenging because the texts with which we're working are crafted in many different ways. And LLMs, large language models, seem to be a promising approach. They are controversial for sure, and we saw just now they tend to hallucinate and give you completely wrong answers. But I would not discount them so easily. They might be considered. I know Monica has very valid reasons to be apprehensive of LLMs. I do as well. But I think compared to what you have to do with synthetic parsing, LLMs give much more flexibility. And we hope that the work we did with that project will give you some guidelines or templates on how regulations at least can be crafted, which elements should be at the least present, and you can even put some auto-completion tool to help you when you craft these regulations. So now I have done the extraction part with an addressee, addresser, action result, submit report, and so on. And these will be fed in to the ontology of my colleague, Monica, which Alessio or Cecile will introduce. Thank you very much.
So a great thanks to Ashwin, which presented one of the parts of the projects. And now I would like to leave the floor to Monica Palmirani from the University of Bologna, full professor of computer science and legal informatics. Monica, I think your work speaks for itself. So of course I wanted also to remind that the Q&A is always open. So if you just wanted to make a question related to these topics, just you're totally free to do that at any time. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to Cecile and Alessio for having me here, for presenting another angle of the same problem. So Ashwin presented the methodology for extracting, classifying, and formalizing, adopting an ontology. But in my very short talk, I wanted to present you also a tool for detecting during the drafting this element in a dynamic interaction with the end user, that we think it's the best way to cope with the goal of the simplification of the better regulation, also to the policy orientation during the drafting. So let me again to explain the anatomy of what we intend for reporting requirement clause. So a particular proportion of the law that are very regular. There is usually the European Commission that must present a report with some temporal parameters, sometimes with frequency, but not always, to Parliament of the Council or the Council about some topics. And this kind of reporting requirement is very important to track over time, because we lose inside of a huge amount of regulation. But moreover, we wanted to detect the policy. So to make queries about the topic of the frequency of this mandatory report and how many times during the years or after COVID, or previous COVID, we needed to have these reports. So another issue that we have tackled in our work is the evolution of the legislation over the time. So we know that the legislation changed, but you can see in this fragment of the legislation that the paragraph 3 of the same article in 2013 totally changed. So we needed to detect, also the model presented before, the evolution over the time, who do so, and how to detect and modify also the diagrams and the policy program. So this is what we have done. So our ontology is designed for this, is combined with the ALI, so monitoring the modification of the time. When the law coming from the publication office change, we have an alert by ALI about the change. We can connect the fragment and you can see the modifications. And you can see, but there is a link of the portal where you can find everything in open source, so you can see the diagram, the ontology, the examples. But the most important part is there is a temporal model. So any actor inside of the model is linked with the temporal moment. And like an agency that changed the name over the time. So it's not written in the stone. And again, we have also made a simulation of the queries, competencies questions, queries, Sparkle and Power Knowledge Graph. And you can see a very nice tool that I found online for testing and to see the visualization. But by the hand, this is what we have done using LEOS. LEOS is a tool of the European Commission, is a legal drafting editor for writing the law. So the interesting thing is to prevent to write a wrong report requesting clause. So to have a check using the Ashwin tool and to detect what is wrong. And what we are doing in LEOS is exactly that. We push the text in the Ashwin tools. The Ashwin tools extract the important elements. We map in the ontology, and we return to the end user for checking again. So there is a feedback and interaction between the artificial intelligence and the human being. And this is a time for the demo, I guess. So we have integrated everything. So this is what I want to show you, that everything, can you switch?
Would it be possible to switch
to the live demo, to my computer? Because this is a static, okay, this is my computer, so this is a LEOS on live. So it's not a demo, it's not a static. So you can see a text, so suppose that you have these requests here. You can see I can modify, so you can see there is a frequency, or there is a demand by the Commission to report to the European Parliament by the 20 January of 2021. So using a customization that University of Bologna developed, we have integrated several tools, including also artificial intelligence tools for retrieving the most relevant definitions close to my topic of the drafting, using similarity, cousin, and average of sentence embedding. And a part of these, for instance, I'm writing, I change the date of today, I save my test, and I ask to the machine to return to me the output of extraction of the reporting request. And the machine detected the verb, the main action, the action result, the topic, the addressee and the addressor, the period of the time. And just for our community, I also reported the semantic triples for understanding the code. But if you are interested, you can download RDF. And the RDF is embedded in a Comantoso. So ready for AKN for EU. And so everything is self-contained, authentic, and certified by the legislator, in the legislative office. And if you want to modify, because I say, no, it's not these, I made a mistake, you can obviously return to the text, and there is a feedback, input and output. So this is what we have done, and is an application concrete for suggesting to the legal expert during the drafting how to compose and how to serialize these. If you are curious, there is a link online, and you can test yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica. We are
of the output that you can see, and if you wanted to see the ontology, there is the repository online.
Yes, thank you, Monica. So I'm so happy, so glad to see the results of our work in concretely, and I think it's really a breakthrough. So I'm really very grateful to both of you for this work. And now I think we have some questions. I need to move the yes. So let me. It's here, and so can you tell me what to? What to?
Yes.
It's that one.
No, we need to do it from the.
Okay. Okay. So we will see. So Monica and Ashwin had prepared some questions for the audience. And 1 hour, I'm like Zsofia this morning, so I don't know which are the questions, but you should see them on, or you show me, maybe?
Yes, 1 second.
So, okay. What is the main bottleneck for the information extraction of legal text using AI methods? So, and standard NLP, LLMs, more. And then you have, you can reply between access to data, large variety of human languages, not yet handled by AI. Yes, multilingual is a key issue for the EU. Ambiguity and complex syntactic structures of human languages. So, of course, and especially lawyers, they know how to write things that no one understands. Voila, and I cannot see the rest, but how do you reply? Okay, we start. How relevant is for you monitoring the reporting requirement clauses in European legislation? It's not your first goal, mainly. Okay, good. We don't have, you know what, we don't have the maybe policy officers, direct policy officers, and no businesses, so that's why. And now what are the main bottlenecks? Voila, so ambiguity and complex syntactic structure of human languages and risk associated with AI, indeed. And we have, yes, access to data. I think law is really accessible, so it's not a problem. And okay, so risk associated with AI becomes a priority. And ambiguity and complexity of syntactic structure, yes, okay. So so it's, I don't know if still it was interesting for you to see this presentation, even though it's not your first goal. I hope so. Yes, what do you?
So I would like to add that this same methodology you can adopt also for other relevant part of the legislation, like obligation, penalties, derogations. So during this morning, one, my opinion, missing point of analysis is a derogation, because in the policy we have a mainstream policy, but plenty of derogation. Also in Denmark, we have many exceptions due of the territories. Some islands are excluded by jurisdiction, and you need to manage extra effort to detect in all the corpus, all the norms of exception. So the same methodology is very good also for other relevant parts of the legislation.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe
yes,
just
perhaps because we wanted to launch a little bit of discussion with a Q&A,
yes.
So I wanted to ask to Monica and Ashwin if they wanted to come here and
Felicitas. No?
And yes, and Felicitas, if you. Yep. And if it's also possible to put the Q&A on the screen. It was still the Slido, so we were in the right. Okay, perfect. So I see the first question is, I think this is directed to Monica. Is Laos usable also for national legislation drafting? And
yes, Laos is designed with the procedure of the European Commission. So there is a structure of a very well process of the so-called trilogo. So there is a part, but it's customizable. And now, with also our contribution of the University of Bologna, we are moving to create components like AI components, suggester of definition, suggester detection of derogation, that are like a Lego. So you can pick up and to take as you like, according to your needs in each legislation. Legal system, each legal system has peculiarities, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. And while in case you have some questions which are ready, I have one ready for especially the semantic expert of this group on whether, because we've seen two different ontologies. We've seen the RRMV ontology and the GRPS ontology, which are both somehow connected to the legislation. And I was wondering whether you foresee some challenges in achieving interoperability among these ontologies, whether they contrast, there is a contrast between each other, or whether they can communicate and then both can be used because they serve similar but different purposes. Yeah, maybe.
It's good to see that we both use the semi-core vocabularies. I think this is the good thing, and also the part where we actually match. However, we need to go more in deep into the suggested and proposed ontologies, because we weren't aware of that before. So I think we will get in touch. Yeah. So.
Yes, definitely. I saw in the presentation very many points of contacts, ALI and also agents and so. Our ontology is a domain ontology based on, let me say, pattern ontology. So it's very general due to the fact that we wanted to reuse for many other purposes where there are events, temporal elements, agents, and output actions. So this is the purpose, because it's quite light.
And then I had also a question on the AI part instead of this kind of work, which is, again, between the work by the Jena University and the work conducted by Ashwin. Both of them kind of use AI to do this task of information extraction. And do you see some parallelisms or connections between extracting, in a way, extracting the regulatory reporting requirement process, which is more semantic role labeling, and instead extracting the processes directly from legislation. And there, also the question is, how much data do we need in order to try to automate these? I don't know if
I would say a lot of manually labeled data is the input for the models. This is what we can say, at least from our work. So I think we manually labeled around 1,000 law texts, really manually, in a process over several months to feed the model, for the extraction of the information from the law. So I don't know how you did it, but
well, we didn't use any annotation. We use an unsupervised approach mostly, but as you can see, it's not as good as having an expert manually annotating the data. Here we rely on the algorithms heuristic to make this decision for us, but sometimes it gets completely out of hand. Also, I think what is extremely important is the evaluation, not in terms of cost, manpower, man-days, and so on, but in terms of the quality of the results produced. And your sample size that you evaluate is also quite important, because the one who are supposed to evaluate the output of the algorithm would be people like you, policy officers, and so on. And in one day, you can only assess the quality of, let's say, 10 or 20 outputs, right? So you cannot do much more. So this is the lack of annotated data and evaluation are two major bottlenecks, I think. But to your question, I would guess that maybe we could try an unsupervised approach to extract some business processes workflow from textual description, because I would guess, out of my head just now, that you would have some syntactic structure or clues to help you effectively extract those elements. But of course, we got to try. And how much data it is linked? Well, if you have a lot of data which is already annotated, then that's the ideal case. That's the holy grail. You can train your algorithms in a nice way. But if you have to annotate by yourself, as you said, it costs money and it costs time. And it's prone to errors, because there can be differences in how you interpret law, as Monica said before also. So it's quite complex.
We are also experimenting with different AI techniques. I mean, LLMs are only one opportunity for extracting information. Yeah, so we also play with rules. Yeah, so the classical NLP stuff. And I mean, knowledge graphs are also part of AI. Yeah, not people know that, but I mean, it's a logic part of AI, and so we are also trying to combine the techniques. Yeah, so and I think this is then the key. Yeah.
And maybe just to add about annotations, what we learned from other experiments in the Commission is that before you start annotating, you need to be very clear about the definitions you give to things.
Exactly.
And because that was partially a failure of the annotation effort that was done by other teams in the Commission, because they did not start from really making sure that all the people who were annotating had the same understanding of things, which is, it seems so obvious, but voila.
And if I add the final, one of the methodologies that we adopted is hybrid AI. Exactly. So we started with the Commentoso. We started with annotated in the hand XML, not from the plain text, because inside of the Commentoso already exist some inputs important, like the articles, the paragraphs, and also the temporal information. And also, we adopted this hybrid approach. So when Ashwin extracted in an unsupervised way, returned to me as a legal expert, and I returned the meaning and the legal point of view of these results. And this meaning is was embedded inside of a model. So I give you an example. We detected a particular reporting requirements. Is a delegated act, so is a very specific institution inside of the European Commission legislation, and this is a very peculiar on the legal point of view in terms of linguistic, and we passed a model in order to improve the accuracy of the AI.
Yeah, so a human-in-the-loop approach.
Exactly, a human-in-the-loop. So unsupervised is the first row. Information passed to the human being expert that interpreted this rule and return the semantic, and we go ahead in such a way.
For me? You had a question. Yeah, that's true. Thank you. I'm just interested in the question of the potentially or partially automating the annotation of legal text that you just discussed. And I would like to ask a very specific question, if you don't mind, because we have done a little experimentation in our own backyard, or at least talked to some academics with whom I believe you're also familiar, Professor Thomas Hildebrand, among others. And my question is, this potential of using NLP, natural language processing techniques, to at least partially automate the markup or annotation of legal text, the experiments that you are aware of or have been part to yourself, what would you say the accuracy rate is, or maybe the other way around, the error rate of the, because I guess it makes a difference. I mean, if it can be, reach maybe never 100%, of course, but 80% can be good, and then it speaks to the role, or rather the cost of the human element, the subsequent human element, right? So I would think that would be a very relevant metric if you're aware of the best efforts in the area. Yeah, thank you.
So in terms of metrics of the human effort, we don't have these kind of metrics now, but is not a massive, is in terms of patterns. So the legal language is regular because it's closer to the procedure. And each linguistic form means a step in the procedure. So when you detect historically, because change over legislature, so we have also analyzing legislature by legislature. Juncker, von der Leyen, and so it's very different. So using these information that come from the legal tradition, you can clean the data set or to use better the data set. Not only 3 years, but only 5, because the Commission is 5 years based.
And in fact, Monica, I have another question. I don't know if you have more from the... Yes,
because we
okay.
There are a couple from the slide, though, but...
Okay, am I allowed? So yes, in fact, I wondered whether, in fact, instead of being overwhelmed by the variety and these huge variety in the existing acquis of the reporting patterns. Is there hope by addressing the problem from the drafting that we could guide the user to adopt streamlined approaches, so that and also by annotating directly at the drafting stage, that we could resolve little by little the diversity, so the lack of a homogeneity which is not needed. So if there is needed heterogeneity, of course we should keep it, but the non-needed, so what do you think, that it's an optimistic about that? Are you?
No, yes, it's a good approach. Call it for drafting by template for functionality. Also, Enrico Francesconi presented several times in his research. So we identify the functionality first, in this case reporting requests, and you have catalogs of linguistic patterns according to the functionalities at the hand of the scope that you would like to cope with. So is a request for delegate access, is a request for request more amendments in the legislation. There is a request for updating figures and tables, and so and so. And in Laos, you can present this template since the beginning as a template, and can help to maintain a regularity.
Thanks.
We are not far from achieving that, actually. From what we have now, it should be a small step, because it's all extracted.
But we have in mind, indeed, the next step is exactly to take this information, to have a template, and there is a ping pong between AI and the human for tuning at the end.
Yes. So we have maybe another a couple of very short questions because we are running a little bit out of time. So is the drafting review component part of Laos or still a proof of concept?
So University of Bologna is now providing this module like Lego, definition, reporting request, and also normative references. So if you are typing something and make a mistake, the AI module suggests you, according to the historical period, the correct syntax, the more pertinent about the topics, based on Eurovoc and also the topic arguments. But for now, we have released it to the Laos team, and the intention, I think, is to put inside.
Yes, I think it's you have the right view on this. I think they are not here today, but I think it's the idea, of course. Yeah. So
and maybe we can wrap up this part of the session. So thank you very much for your time, your question, your research.
Thank you.
And I wanted to and now it's you will introduce. Okay.
Yeah, so now we will welcome on stage a very interesting and incredible project about the statistics in Spain. So the interoperable statistical node, if I'm not mistaken. And first I want to make the link between why we are looking at that. As you know, the statistical system in the EU is really the main organism. You can go already, but it's better maybe if I explain, announce you. I will announce you so that people know you. So what is the statistical system? It's a system that has been created to help policy making. Its purpose is to provide information, curated information that supports the policy-making process. So in that, it's a reporting process of the EU. And why we want to stress and to put it on the stage today is because statisticians, and I am one of them from my old past, so just are people who are learned to be very, very accurate and have quality in their data management. They are the best in class in this respect. So with this said, we are here with us a troupe, a big company, but which is shows the complexity and also a potential solution of a multi-layered with all levels of government, starting maybe, I will start from the more local ones, and the woman, the only woman here, and I will call on stage Alberica. Wait, I have my, I need to read because, sorry, I'm not yet ready. So, Alberica Garcia Rodriguez, who is in fact the coordinator of data access and statistical quality in the Canarian Institute of Statistics, which is the central authority within the regional statistical system and the official research hub for the government in the Canary Islands. So welcome on stage. And then, so I'm now the next level, I think, is the representative of Andalusia, yes, and which is Mr. Agustín Villar Iglesias. Villar, pardon. Two L's, true, sorry. Alors, Agustín is an expert and a researcher, if I'm expert in what? In geodetic and cartographic engineering at the University of Rennes. And you have been professor also at the Autonomous University, or you are still professor at the Autonomous University of Madrid. And for now, it's a bit, you have a lot of expertise, so I will switch directly to the end. What are you doing now? You are, currently, you hold the subdirectorate of the Institute of Statistics and Cartography of Andalusia. And you are a member of board as director, but I think this is the position that I just mentioned that is making you being here, is it? Yes, okay. Thank you for being with us. More, we have José Velasco. José Velasco has a PhD in data science and now is a researcher, in big data, data visualization, data analysis, and machine learning. And I saw you nodding to the previous presentation, so it was through your ears. So you have a master's degree in applied statistics and data mining. So Jorge is in fact at the level of you are now working for. Yes, so you are at the national level. You are the one from the National Statistical Office. You see, so we are, and what is above? The EU level. And the EU level is represented here today by Adrián Juan Verdejo, who is the policy officer that is following the technical support infrastructure projects, and especially this one, but he was also the one supporting the Danish project where Becky was presenting earlier today. So you see, it's a big crowd. If you, I will give you, let you present in the order you want, and you have, okay, you are.
Thank you so much for inviting this event. The Spanish statistical system is responsible for preparing the official statistic of the state, as well as providing the information necessary to prepare the official statistics for the European statistical system. Due to the decentralized Spanish administrative organization, each autonomous community has its own statistical system that prepares statistics at the regional level. This requires exchanging statistical data as well as administrative data for statistical purposes among the different levels of the management. One of the existing problems in the activity of the public statistical competencies in Spain is that, in general, access to key data is provided through a simple file exchange without structural interoperability. Furthermore, the statistical data exchange process in Spain is highly bureaucratic and inefficient, requiring measures to improve data exchange and implement technical interoperability data and metadata management, data semantics, and quality control. As we'll see later in this project, the key coordination body is CITE, which means Interregional Statistical Committee, which establishes coordination, cooperation, and generalization in statistical methods between the state and the autonomous community. In this slide, this graph shows us the assist situation in terms of data exchanges among the statistical organization of Spain. Only are included only the situation of the two regions that acted as beneficiaries of the technical support instrument project. For this reason is, as we am here, Canary Island and Andalusia, together with the other beneficiary, National Statistics of Spain, and the agencies of the General Administration of the state, Social Security, Cadastre, Transport, both authorities, pensions, the tax agency, the Ministries of Justice, Education, Universities, and Foreign Affairs. The other 15 regions also exchanged information, not are in the graph, so you can imagine the magnitude this graph would reach. All exchanges require participating organizations to sign legal documents that we name it supply agreements. All these exchanges of information occur through different exchange systems: email, FTP, web download apps, lockers, optical media, and various clients, even paper. PDF, for example, is a paper, not digital paper. You'll understand that in the era of the web services and cloud computing, the situation is completely unsustainable. To resolve this sickening mess, obviously the best medicine is interoperability among different levels of statistical management in Spain. Within the CITE, it was decided to establish a working group known as Interstat to define the model of a future statistical interoperability node, taking into account the provisions of the National Interoperability Act. The objective of the working group was, firstly, identify the legal framework for the configuration of a statistical interoperability node. Secondly, identify the conditions, protocols, and functional or technical criteria necessary for the aforementioned exchange of data for statistical purposes. And finally, identify organizational, semantic, or technical interoperability requirements in matters of the public statisticals that could be developed by the Statistical Interoperability Node. The working group is made up for 5 representatives of the autonomous community in addition to the INE, Balearic Island, Canary Island, Catalonia, Galicia, Basque Country, Murcia, and Andalusia. And the final result of the work of the international group was the preparation of the CITE report. This report supports the strategic decision-making of this project and has defined the future model of the statistical interoperability node that operationalizes the national strategy for the management and exploitation of statistical data, establishing the technical and the operational basis for the simplification of exchange processes. The intention is that the statistical interoperability node will provide legal, organizational, semantic, and technical coverage for the integration of the different information systems of the different levels of administrative management. The main idea is that Interstat will be formed as a national space for statistical data. Like this, it will guarantee the standardization of exchange processes, facilitating access to data by the different participants in the processes. The inspiration is Gaia X, which serves as a framework for a national space of official statistical data and infrastructure for sharing. Data platforms supports sharing and exchanging data, data inventories where data owners can offer them and user request them. Data sovereignty defined as the ability of each stakeholder to make decisions about how digital processes, infrastructure, and data flows are structured, built, and managed. Now I'll hand over the floor to Adrian Juan from the DG Reform to explain how the hell he chose this project.
Thank you, Agustin. Well, I'm Adrian, and as Agustin said, and Cecile, I'm from the Director General of Structural Reforms at the Commission, so DG Reform. And yeah, why the hell did we select this project? I question myself every morning about that. Agustin comes with a new idea. Let's have another workshop. Let's have 3 workshops instead of 1. No, it's been a pleasure, and it's been quite a journey. And this project actually had quite some beautiful things that we like at DG Reform. Our projects, they usually go on the directions of course, structural reforms, institutional reforms, administrative reforms. And this project had one of the things that we like. One of them was this multi-level government kind of aspect. A lot of regions collaborating, working together with the national level as well. So it was quite interesting from that angle. We didn't include any other country. That will be the next step. But within Spain, we also have a lot of actors to work together. So that was one of the main reasons to select that. So our commissioner always impels us like not to go back to Madrid or any capital, but also to think about regions, Andalusia. Also, we have the outermost region of Canary Islands. So these are regions that we wanted to have in our project. And one of the things we could have with this is like territorial cohesion, work on working more efficiently, on how we exchange data. And yeah, as Agustin just said, to solve that mess that he saw at the beginning of different institutions sharing data, sending files. It doesn't only happen in Spain, God forbid. It happens in every other country. I've seen countries telling me, no, we just put a hard drive, we've shipped it around the corridor, and we just send it over. Okay, so that's the kind of problems we wanted to solve here and to build a little bit of resiliency into how statistics work in Spain and how data is exchanged. You saw a lot of actors, not only them. That's the third reason why we selected this project. There was a strong mandate. Agustin talked about the Interterritorial Committee of Statistics, which involves a lot of statistical offices and the national level as well. And they have this document that was very often used to say, okay, this is the direction we have to go forward with. And they're waiting for the results of this project with like open hands, let's say. With that, I wanted to show you a little bit. This is like the structure of our project. We worked like in a triumvirate kind of, as we call it, environment where we had like Agustin, who requested the project from Andalusia, but they co-created, let's say, they came up together because this is not like Spain or a region pushing, it's all of them pushing. That's why we came together to agree on what we are doing. And we had the 3 of them taking the decisions. And we had DG Reform as providing a little bit of expertise, engaging DG Digit, also statistics from the Commission. We also had TaxSud to interview during the benchmarking. So that was our role there, to hold hands and help them arrive to the end point. And a contractor that actually delivered the work and that actually implemented a proof of concept that my colleague will show later on. This is a bit of the structure of the project that we had, but it's not rocket science. basically all of our projects look the same. Christopher Schambeck's project is very similar to that. Firstly, we start with just agreeing among ourselves what we are going to do. This is the inception phase. We come back together again, and we agree on what we're doing. Also with the contractor, it's not like, okay, you do what we tell you to do. No, it's like we work together. The project is not successful if we don't work together. And as an example of that is the ASIS situation. We go up to Spain and we gather a lot of information that we hand in to the contractor, and they analyze the practices in Spain. This is not doable for any contractor if Spain, and if they greatly did it, collaborate and give a lot of information, feedback, ideas, etc. Then we jumped into the business cases. That is, we analyzed the potential solutions to the problem that we identified on interoperability among the statistical offices, and we had several solutions to them. And we had the contractor give us some recommendations, their assessment, what do they suggest us to do, and of course we did completely the opposite thing, right? And we selected another thing that we found in Spain already in use. So we tried to reuse that, and we jump into the what we call the to-be phase, where we design the solution. We have a proof of concept to test the feasibility of that design, and then finally we're now in the final steps where we are like raising awareness. This is an example of it. And the 3 workshops that Agustin wants to do in the Canary Islands, it's another example. And yeah, so basically we're coming towards the end of the project, and with that we have a proof of concept almost finished with 3 scenarios. So with that, I will tell you a little bit on the benchmarking, and I will pass it to my colleagues. We had a thorough look at practices in Europe, and we talked with Switzerland, for example. They presented to us a very interesting model that they had. I mean, they didn't have a platform like the one we wanted to build, but they had like a governance system in place that was really interesting and really inspired us. We talked to Germany. We saw that they don't have such a platform like the one we intended to build. We tried to talk to others. We couldn't even reach them. So, okay, we jumped inwards looking, and we talked to Digit, we talked to Taxud, and we talked to statistics, and we had all of them analyzed, right? E-delivery, Testa, CCN, and in all of them we identified like, okay, it's not exactly what we need, right? We saw a lot of data coming unstructurally from a lot of different systems. So some of these solutions, they were very nice and kind of an overkill for our problem sometimes, and some other times it didn't deliver the requirements that we needed. So another example was dummies, but that was like kind of our view was more decentralized, right? Like every actor sharing information bidirectionally. That's why we didn't quite adopt it. And then Gaia X. We had that as a guiding principle, but we didn't see like a reusable component that we could just plug in and work with. We also had the contractor propose to us like a custom solution, WSO2, and like, okay, we build this thing from scratch and everything. But then, and this is part of the assist, we identified that, okay, there's a data platform that Statistics Spain is already trying to use, and this is proposed by the General Administration of Spain. Why don't we use that? And that's what we did in the end. We selected that one, which was a challenge. We had to extend the project because the contractor was not ready for that. They didn't even propose that. It was us in the end saying, why don't we use this? So we had, that's what I say in this, I mean, it's a buzzword, co-creation, but that's exactly what we happened. Like we were flexible to just be a bit anti-fragile and move around and go forward with the project. And with that, I just pass it to the next one to talk to the to-be situation. So Alberica, please.
Okay, thank you so much. As Agustin said before, each region in Spain has its own statistical system, so it's necessary to share data across different levels of management. However, the current system faces significant challenges. For example, We have many processes to exchange data. And key data access is often provided using basic files without syntactic or semantic interoperability. To fix these questions or problems, we propose the creation of the statistical interoperability node. Our solution follows a federated data space model, and you can see the basic idea on this slide. It's a simple picture that shows the main parts and how they work together. There's a central hub where each statistical organization can connect using access points to share the data. Additionally, data will be shared between organizations through individual supply agreements. So each organization can keep control over the data. That's very important for us. In short, in our model, we have identified the roles, responsibilities, systems, and tasks that will support the node. Moreover, it provides legal, organizational, semantic, and technical support for integrating several information systems, promoting a national space for statistical data based on standards. Okay, at first, we have many requirements, but it wasn't practical to work with such a large list. So by applying Moscow methodology with our must-haves, should-haves, could-haves, and want-haves, we selected the most important ones for us. Each transaction will be supported by a supply agreement according to guidelines defined by the site. The data catalog will organize all data sets, detailing information such as data type, format, location, permissions, and so on. Organization will maintain control over the data, including security aspects. This collaborative governance model will ensure transparency and accountability. The node will deploy processes to control and oversee data transfers, reducing errors with minimal human input. Implement rules and validations to protect the security and integrity of data exchanges. Establish security channels for receiving and sending information. Handle asynchronous transfers and online transactions. Manage both current and potential new transfers while adapting to new needs. And finally, grant external user access to specific data through a permissions management system. As you can imagine, the 9 requirements are must-haves for us. And now I hand over the floor to Jorge Velasco from the National Statistical Institute of Spain.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much. So the next step, once we had more or less sorted out what we wanted, the 2B situation, we went to the proof of concept to see if we could map some of these requirements to map it in a functional proof of concept. So we knew we couldn't go too further away, and we knew we had to focus on the main things. So if you remember from what my colleague said, we had the supply agreements, and this is where all the information, all the administrative information is sorted out. So we have already the agreement, we have all the legal basis in which we have all the information that we want to push to the system. And this will be through these supply agreements and through the catalogs. So what we did, we took some of these catalogs, one of these data sets, we transformed it into the DCAT-AP standard, the catalog and the supply agreements, and we push it to the system. And once we had that, we wanted to check all these milestones, which mainly are, if we can think of 2 main use cases, that is a pull case and a push case, right? So a pull case could be one of the beneficiaries of the node would want to see, to take the data from the system, okay? So that has to be governed, it says in the end, no? This has to be governed, user permissions, from what period of time to what period of time, what kind of data sets, what kind of data, not even all the data set, but maybe part of it, So we wanted to check if we could implement some of this. So that would be the pull case, that this is a person trying to get information, and the push case, that it could be in an automated way. You don't have to do it, you don't have to ask for someone to do it, but we can implement it in an automated way. This is that we have the information, as we said before, and so we make ETL work processes to do all the steps of the process, from one node to the other. And a very important thing that my colleagues mentioned as well is that we were inspired by data spaces. So it was a requirement as well for the beneficiaries that they didn't want to persist their information in the system. So they want to keep the sovereignty of the information that they are trespassing. This is absolutely reasonable. And so the proof of concept implements this. So we knew we had different, even within the platform, this is in the, as we said before, in the general administration data platform. Even there, we had different possibilities. One of them is the data virtualizations, and we try to figure out the best possible way to do this, because not all the software that do the same things do it in the same way. So we had to use the technology that we had in this platform, right? So this platform uses Cloudera, is a Cloudera cluster, and on top of it they have the IBM suite of products, right? Data states, pipelines, knowledge catalog, and so on. So one of the important steps was to figure out which of these technology was more suitable for this. So this could be a very reduced workflow, but it's mainly, the idea is that even if it is automated or it is in a pull request, as we said before, it will be, first of all, if you have access to the system, then check all this information. There's all the information that is needed in the supply agreements, in these contracts, and see if you have the approval. Then you will go to the catalog and take from there the information that has been requested, and then make the actual transfer of the information from the origin to the destiny without persistent information. So in blue dark is what we actually implemented in the proof of concept. Before it is another information system that it was not implemented in the proof of concept. So I can actually just tell you that we have a long way to go, but we have to implement all these supply agreements and catalog transformations and all the management of this information. Because before, I didn't tell you before, but we are very much metadata based. Okay, as we said before, we transfer all the supply agreements into DCAT-AP, so we are going to rely on standards. All right. So another functional milestone is the catalog consultation. This is all the beneficiaries of the node will be able to consult, and of course the governance of the system. And just how are we doing? So we had a technical support from the people that are managing the platform. This is the SGAT is the official institution, and Telefonica is the ones that are giving the technical support. And yes, so all the beneficiaries provided all the necessary files, and we made this analysis of the tools available on the platform. We made we sorted out which were the best way to do this, as we said before, and yes, it is implemented in a pre-production environment. So yes, so what we have seen is that okay, this works. This is maybe it's not the best way we would have done it, but it's a way that it works. And we have here a very cost-efficient way to do it, because this platform already exists, and yes, so all counts, and we have to take into consideration these things. Yeah, so next steps is, like if you remember from the beginning, Now we have to make, once we have seen, we have proof that this works. Now we have to make workshops to disseminate this information and finalize the to-be situation, make the roadmap of how we are going to implement this. We, as the National Institute, we are willing to put some resources, to build this platform, and so we have a lot of governance to go on there. So we'll give the floor now to Agustin.
Only for highlighting, the highlights of the project, no? Coordination efforts in a decentralized environment like us, highlighting the collaborative approach within a decentralized context, particularly in Spain. It seems simple, but we are very proud to have been able to sit down and build something together. We are working within a multi-level governance model, including heterogeneous regions, including an outermost region like Canarias, and the national level, which have their own priorities, governance models, and political directions. No? Secondly, insist inspired by Gaia X and data spaces, drawing inspiration from Gaia X and the concept of the data spaces as a driving force. To be honest, this fact was something we discovered when developing the CITE report. It was our aha moment, no? It was our eureka moment, no? Essentially, the meeting point among the several visions of the same problem. And finally, significant innovation, particularly in achieving legal and organizational interoperability, while also ensuring a robust technical foundation. Actually, technical interoperability is not the problem. The other dimensions are the problem, and addressing them implies a cultural change that can only be achieved through an innovation process like this. Thank you so much, and that's all.
So thank you so much for your presentation, and this is very interesting and promising project, and which I would definitely call a success story, at least applied to the specific field of statistical transmission of statistical information. Now I would kindly ask to put the Slido in, because we also had prepared a question to the public. Okay, so we have what are for you the key aspects for the success of statistical interoperability, the simplification of data exchange processes through standard technology, governance and security, the data quality, the use of standards, use of metadata and user interfaces, or performance and scalability. So I can see that somebody in the meantime is already answering, and that the key aspects are, okay, we see the importance of the use of standards, and I personally also agree with this approach, and most of you also agree with this, I see. Somebody, okay, governance and security, which is indeed a key aspect of statistical interoperability. So we are a little bit short on time, so I'm going forward with introducing the next speaker. So I wanted to leave the floor to Michael Kuban from DG Connect G1, and Michael is a seconded national expert in the data unit, and has expertise in the coordination of the common European data spaces and the implementation of the Data Governance Act. So thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I have very difficult ask to attract your attention, even though it's almost 5:30, but I would be very quick. I don't have presentation. I would speak about the role of the data spaces, how can the data spaces could support the reduction of administrative burden. Why me? I don't know, but I work in the DG Connect, and we are currently looking for the new way how we can reduce administrative burdens. You know, we are 3 weeks after the European elections, so there are new topics, new areas that we would like to present the new commissions, the new parliament, and we are looking around and trying to see what is available. And there's a lot, many initiatives on the digital policy making areas are mushrooming in the commissions. There are several initiatives in Digit. There are some initiatives in Connect, Better Regulation Unit. It's been active for many years. And we are looking around and trying to see how we can contribute to this discussion also from our perspective. As DG Connect, G1, we are working and we have been created the so-called European Data Strategy, which basically the main vision of this document that was published in 2020 is to bring more data to the market, and not only from the public sector, but also from the private sector. And we're also trying to build a condition to make data more accessible. And we are trying to also focus on the fact that we have to find a way how to share the data among the sectors. And we come up with the concept of common European data spaces. I would maybe try to, in my presentation, slightly reflect on the achievement we have made so far in terms of the policy part, and then I would link it to the common European data spaces. So since 2020, we have come up with very solid legislative framework. We have, I would start with Data Governance Act. If you are familiar, we are focusing on the protected data that are covered, that are created also in the public sector, that are outside of scope of the Open Data Directive, but they are to a certain extent very sensitive. It could be the confidential statistics, some personal data that cannot be shared, but we come up with the Data Governance Act that allows to a certain extent to have access to this data for researchers, for any companies or any entity that explain the reasons why they should have access and how can you reuse it. And the data owner, as a digital sovereign ruler, could decide whether the data could be available for the specific purpose. And for that, we come up with the ideas of national single information points, so that each member state will provide you the list of so-called protected data that cannot be reused. They can be reused for certain purposes. And this list will be available on the European Register of Protected Data on the data.europa.eu. You can have a look. There's a national single information point from Czechia or from Netherlands. So this is the first legal framework that is embedded in the DGA. And the second one is the concept of, which is quite novel. It's a data altruism concept, which allows you as a person, as an entity, to donate data for altruistic purposes. And we embedded in the chapter 3 of the DGA. And again, it's quite novelty because we allowed that individuals that would like to donate their personal data, anonymized personal data to research and we provide the legal framework to do that. Then in the sphere of public sector, we come up with the extension, I would say, Open Data Directive. It's called High Value Datasets, which basically give the list of the 6 categories of data that are created, generated in the public sector. And the 6 categories: mobility, geospatial, earth, environment, mobility, and company ownership, which allows you the member states are obliged to provide these datasets. And the deadline for the member states was 2 weeks ago, or on the 9th of June. So you can have a look on the datasets that are so-called high-value datasets, also again on the European data portal. The third legislative framework, it's called Data Act, which enables to unlock the data, industrial data, from industry, from specific sectors that cannot be shared, or the companies have difficulties to share this data. It could be IoT data, it could be the data that when you buy the washing machine, that you have specific data that are collected by the sensor, or you can buy the smart tractor, but the sensors are collecting all types of data. It's a very enormous quantity of data, but they cannot be shared to the different company. The third party, if you have some maintenance repair company that would like to fix the tractor, but they would like to use the data that the data from the service to implement it, to fix it, to improve it, it was not allowed with the Data Act that will be applicable in September 2025. We can give it go. We can the member states, the EU companies will have the legal framework to get an access to the data. So that was the legal framework. And now we can speak more about the common European data spaces. I think everyone is familiar. Could you please raise your hands if you heard about the common European data spaces? Yeah, well, I'm very, very happy that I have so skills and known audience. Basically, the concept of common European data spaces is to build the trusted, federated governance infrastructure that will allow us to share the data among the sectors, between also not only the private sector, but also the public. And we, during this implementation, during our work on the supporting of the data spaces, we came across of many challenges, many myths, and we also try to support the data spaces in terms of funding. But we have come across at the beginning that the data spaces such as are mainly considered as an infrastructure, as an IT system. But I would say it's, let's put the data governance and infrastructure on the same level, and each plays their significant role, because both are very strong feature of the common European data spaces. And we have been supporting common European data spaces in 14 sectors. Well, until today, we have made a rollout of 14 strategic economic sectors of the data spaces through the several fundings, through the Horizon Europe, and through specific fundings in the Digital Europe program. We start with this kind of like soft analysis of the sector specifications, standards, ontologies, we try to analyze in each sector the crucial stakeholders, semantic vocabularies, all the technical standards that were specific for these domains. We call it coordinated and support actions. And then there was the first phase, and the second phase, we are moving to the deployment phase. And in the mobility, agriculture, manufacturing, Green Deal data space, we are slowly moving to the deployment phase, and to support the interoperability, the communication between the data spaces. We have launched in last year, 2 years ago, the Data Space Support Center, which through the 30 partners allows to share the best practices, provide a blueprint architecture, provide the glossary, the common nominatives and vocabularies to make it more interoperable and feasible and operational across the sector. As Connect G1, we don't have only policy part, but we have the research part. And through the Horizon Europe project, we have 2 calls that now they are focusing on the regulatory compliance technologies that should focus in very specific details on developing and piloting integrating system, compliance tools, and data economy enablers that process the increasing data volumes more efficiently and distill more useful knowledge of data. We try to also through this project in Horizon Europe find the applicable principles and architecture that would immediately or defaultly inherent, compliant to the legislation. So that was a bit challenging. And so far we have 4 projects that would be launched if they will be selected, because we had a call from Horizon Europe, cluster for AI-driven operation and compliance technologies, and we are selecting the project that have been submitted in Horizon Europe. So I would go back to the myth that we would like to unveil in terms of common European data spaces, because as Jorge said, that it's the data holder who is in charge. Well, we have the infrastructure. It's super great. We have the modern technologies, but it's the data holder, the data owner, who has a right to give an access as the crucial file. It's not the commission or specific company that provides the infrastructure, but it's the data holder who has the legal mandate and rights to provide the access to the data. And in the data spaces, we are slightly changing the concept of the primary use of data to secondary use of data. Sometimes our data are collected for primary purpose that is biased and connected, bound and connected with the legislation. But also we can see that with the amount of data we have, we can find the secondary use of data. But it's also difficult for the data holder to decide whether the data could be contributed, whether data could be provided. And it's up to the data holder who could decide. The data spaces are voluntary, so it's when my colleagues from Czech Digital Information Agency ask me, are we obliged to participate in the data spaces? Should we follow any specific sector? Is it mandatory for us? It's not. You can participate. But also for civil servants, for the member state, it's very difficult to understand, because it's voluntary, and something what is voluntary in the eyes of civil servant, it's difficult to proceed that, well, I don't have a mandate on my daily work as a civil servant to work on something what is voluntary, because, well, I'm the taxpayer is paying me for my job right now, so it's sometimes difficult to find the right way to explain it to hierarchy, whether we should participate, start the pilot projects. So, and this is very important to also see this logic behind. And also the other myth is that it's not the Commission who is the main driver of the common European data spaces. It's a solid base. Commission kick off through the foundings, through some data space support center, this very strong, complex support of the data spaces, and all active players. But each player, it's the main driver of the data spaces. That's very crucial. And each player should also, again, bear in mind that it's again the data holder who owns the data, and whatever they are doing, it should be in line with the legislation and legislative framework. Now, and we are coming with the data spaces should serve as a concept for reduction of administrative burdens. They provide very complex structure, because through the data spaces, the data, the stakeholders are findable. We can find them. We can find the data. We have the long system of support. We have specific sectoral project that could show the use cases of data spaces that is really operational and functioning. So data spaces can facilitate the discoverability of the data, but also the stakeholders in specific sectors. They provide access management mechanism, so it provides you indeed the way how you as an entity accessing to the data under certain conditions that are given by the legislative framework. And data spaces could and they have a good basis for it, because they were not the colleagues in the data space support center, but in the specific sector, agriculture, they were not inventing the wheel. So they started with the sector-specific legislation and the standards, and it could help to speed up the process of taking on board the new players and new entities that would like to participate. The data space is also focusing on the establishing connection with reference data, vocabularies, ontologies to facilitate the navigation across the data hubs and data sets. So it's very clear. And since the data spaces are, in a way, under the legislative framework, one of the acts that I mentioned, the Data Governance Act, that set up the Digital Information Board, so-called EDIP. We have the representative of the member states with the stakeholders from the private sector, experts, and we can, through them, we can ask the questions and we can try to find the solutions for some difficulties that our member states are dealing with, setting up the competent authorities, finding the right data, giving the competencies, etc. So the best practices could be shared. But data spaces have also many challenges. It could be the legal challenges that they need to stick with the current legislation. So there's legacy legislation, we have the current legislation, and we try to implement something new. I have a background, well, my background is from the public administration, and it's absolutely terrible from my experience when there is this old legacy system that's still in place, but there's new standards that are more agile, more flexible, but you need to find a budget, you need to find the right people, you need to provide the training. So there are many challenges, not only the legal level, but also on the organizational level. So that's very crucial. And also in terms of semantic interoperability, there are some complex and different stakeholders that are sticking to the different standards. So it's ongoing dialogue, what can be used and what can be recommended by all stakeholders. So there should be some harmonized solutions. And of course, in terms of public sector, again, there are in place some vendor locks that could not allow the new technology to come in. Well, there's not enough expertise. So there are many challenges to integrate the data spaces as such to the existing legal system. I wouldn't go more further. I would conclude that data spaces is a solid base for the reduction of administrative burdens, for data-driven reporting. It provides a solid base. It's a strong legal framework, but it's still, from the perspective of the member states, we are still have to find a way how to make it. I wouldn't say more mandatory, but more use from the public sector, which is very important, because the companies, well, they might shift their focus, their priorities with the new commission, maybe with the new technologies, but it will be at the end the public sector that will be also the user of the common European data spaces. Thank you.
I think we have some question for the audience. So, is it? I don't see anyone, but the questions, they are not there. So let's. Oh, they are there. Okay. Oh, just afterwards. Okay, we can. Okay, let's start with the questions from the audience, and then it was the questions for the audience.
Sorry. A question for the data spaces. I'm Willem van Gemert from the Publications Office. I didn't know that the data spaces were not mandatory, so I thought they were, so that's really interesting. Now, on the other hand, the high-value data sets are mandatory. So is there an obligation to make them part of the data spaces, or is there only, for instance, an obligation to make them then available in the Data Europe EU?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I like it because also it links to the high-value data sets to the data spaces. And let's say that the high-value data sets, especially the category of, well, one of the category, this is statistical, it's the one that basically gives the list of what is supposed to be available as an open data by the 9th of June, and it should be available for the innovation, for reuse. And if the data are available, they are part of the common European data spaces because it's open and everyone can reuse it. So if the company or the public institution use the high-value data sets for their work, and they are connected to the data spaces, or they have they add the value to the data to the high value data sets. It's okay. The data spaces, I mean, they are not mandatory in a way as we know the legislation as such. So the legal framework for data spaces, so Data Governance Act, Data Act, and high value data sets, that's a mandatory. But as such, the data spaces are not mandatory, they are voluntary. So it's, but I would see that the high value data sets with the value, social economics that they are supposed to have, and I believe they do have, because we have conducted many studies and we talk with many stakeholders when we were preparing this piece of legislation. They are a significant player in terms of value that is available in the European market, in the data economy. So it's part of the European data economy slash equal, which is that should be the common European data spaces.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so of course you are allowed to ask. Of course.
I was working since 2007 in implementation directive Inspire in Andalusia, and this is in fact this is my main job. No, now I was pushing on pulling, no, pushing in interoperability. Note, no, for statistical, because in my organization is very singular, no, it's the result of the fusion of the ancient cartographic institute plus ancient statistical institute, no. This situation is only in Mexico, no, Mexico and Andalusia, no, and the community of Inspire in Andalusia and in Spain. Have some expectations about the green data, the environmental data space of the Governance Act will be inspired, the new Inspired, no? And I think that the successful of the Inspired, because Inspired has been a really successful, no, for the geospatial information. I think that the successful has been the mandatory of the directive Inspire, no? In fact, was implemented in the national regulatory, and is mandatory in Spain, even for the autonomous community, no? And I don't understand why not is mandatory. I think it is it was being mandatory. I think that the data spaces will be a very successful.
Do you mean the geospatial data and HVDS or Green Deal data spaces? Well,
data spaces and all of them.
Well, let's say that the implementing regulation on the high-value data sets is focusing on the list of public sector data in 6 categories that are available. And in the annex of high-value data sets, there is a list and the condition how the data should be provided. And in category of Inspire, and because we are working with the horizontal legislation in our in the Commission, we didn't want to invent the wheel. So when there was a particle, any user asking like how we are going to provide, how we are supposed to provide the data, we said, okay, well, use the Inspire, all the standards, all the methodology, because the Inspire and statistical category and this 6 categories of high-value data sets are most advanced and developed sectorial data in the list based on this, I don't want to use word tradition, but also based on this long experience of providing support, standards, and everything what was basically under Inspire. So it's well, a good job, and the Inspire. Well, the geospatial data sets under the Inspire are part of the HVDS, and they have everything what has value. It's on the map. It's geospatial information. So, and for the reuses, that it has the biggest value. So we expect that the biggest reuse will be especially from the geospatial data in Europe and HVDS.
Okay, thank you. So we have some questions from the chat. So one which has even received a bit of a voting. So we spoke of data spaces in the context of statistics and sectorial, but what about the legal data space? But I'm not sure we have the right audience here to speak about the legal data space.
Well, if I can react, we have the 6 categories of high-value data sets, and we have conducted a study which will be the new categories in case the new commission, our hierarchy will decide to give more, to extend the list of the 6 categories. And the legal data were amongst these categories that should have significant impact and should be part of the new, so-called the new version, if there will be, we don't know yet. So the legal data, metadata, Rolex data, the national legal data should be part of the new category. But it's also in terms of the big boom with large language models, with the using of ChatGPT. This is a very valuable source of data that can be used, and it has huge value also in Europe because of the multilingual aspect in Europe. So, but yeah, it could be the new HVDS. Let's see.
Next generation. Before we jump to the next question in the chat, I had a specific question to the Spanish audience here. And in fact, I would like to get a bit more information about the legal agreements you were mentioning, because I would like to understand from the legal basis, because you have legal basis, it's statistical data is framed by laws, and how do you reach these, what are these agreements really about to create interoperability? Because I was imagining, and just to understand, that it can be that in some of the many actors you have, the approach, a semantic approach was not aligned, that you had to transformation, etc. And so my mind was wondering about, is it, are they defining data, specific data points that they want to reach and the definition of them, and who has the charge of the transformation of the data? So voila, so around this legal aspect to bridge, because you know, digital-ready policymaking starts from the legal layer, and I was really interested in the solution path, the implementation path, but I missed this little bridge. So, and I understood it's a legal agreement that is this bridge. So please.
I said before, in relation to the highlights, no, that the problem not is the technical interoperability, no. In fact, the problem is the legal and the organizational interoperability. Our objective is that the statistical interoperability node was not only a technological concept, no? It's the instrument to regulation on all of these questions, no? Because the interoperability statistical node is composed for all statistical systems in Spain, in an autonomous community. If we compare with, for example, with the implementation of Inspire, the success of this situation in legal interoperability is that the directive is mandatory for member states. I miss in this case an European directive, no, in statistical matters, no. Would be a good decision for all member states, because we save a lot of problems, no. In Spain we invented alone how go to solve these problems about the legal and organizational problems, no? And this is a really challenge, you know.
Okay, thank you. And just you mentioned the Inspire, you know, it was under revision, and the outcome of the revision is that it's not flexible enough. So they intend, I don't know what they are cooking now, but it's to be a bit less prescriptive than it was. Yeah. So okay, now
but Inspired point out a path, no?
Yes,
and
really it was a great.
For us, is the religion.
Yeah, maybe we go now to the, so just there were questions that were prepared by, I think by Michal, and you answered, so still 11, oh, so wait, we keep, who is moving the, you are, keep on please. Okay, so just to see what are your reactions, still 11 people replying. So for the question about what features of the common European data spaces have the most potential for reducing burden, which is key for Connect Now, we see that the discoverability and availability of information in a flexible manner is the prominent reply, followed closely by ensuring the application of the once-only principle, which means that indeed, so the access to data is also, so it's only not finding, but then accessing information is important for it. And then the others have less, less importance. Okay, and now there was still a last question. I'm not sure we have still time for the GDPR. Okay, maybe.
The problem not in Spain, the problem not is the GDPR. The problem is who interpreted the GDPR.
Okay.
This is the problem. The statistical people, we have very clear how interpreted the GDPR, but there are a lot of difficulties to interpreting the reglement, no?
But I heard from your talk that you anonymize the data in any case, so this is okay. Yeah, please.
Just to point out that, yes, we have the GDPR that is implemented in a national basis in the LOPD, but then we have a specific legislation for statistical matters. And so this involves that for investigation, for statistics, we can ask for this information to not only to organizations, but as well to the public, to people. And yes, but then of course we cannot disseminate any kind of personal data, and it's all under the statistical secret that we call.
Okay, thank you very much. And last, so I will wrap up first by advertising something that is of interest for our policy team. So we are here, the Digital Ready team, but our policy team, you have a question? Okay, you will put it, but you have given it. Okay, so if you can put this picture on the slide so that people can, so I will make the advertisement for this. In fact, which is not unknown by Christopher, for instance, but maybe by some of you. So we are in the process of designing interoperability assessment guidelines, and because of the act that is into force, and assessment guidelines, interoperability assessment guidelines must be also into force by January next year. So whoever feels like he's entitled to share his thoughts about it, you can by accessing this the QR code here. So it seems it's only a 5-minute survey. Good luck. So I hope it's the case, but I think so because I was, okay. And then, so to conclude, I think we had a very long journey starting from the policy making, high level, abstract, and we went down to implementation matters that still feed the policy making cycle. And so I really congratulate all the speakers today. I'm very also our last speaker who came with interesting information about data spaces. And I wish you a very nice evening. I hope we will meet again in the dinner tonight. Let's see. And tomorrow, thank you. Alessio, please take the
Okay. Yes, and I hope tomorrow there will be the main conference, which will be more high level and focusing exactly on the implementation of the Interoperable Europe Act, and with a focus on interoperability assessments, especially for what it concerns and the relation between digital ready policymaking as an enabler of interoperability assessment and as a factor that potentially establishes practices in organization, in public service organization, to reduce the overall cost of and ensures the replicability of these assessments. So we hope you all to see you there. It's going to be in the afternoon, and there we are going to have Frank Noel from the Publications Office, Frank Lehmann from the Belgian Ministry of Administrative Simplification. Zsofia Sziranyi is gonna present a little bit the overall implementation of the Interoperable Europe Act within the Commission, and we are also gonna have I think I'm missing something, but we are going to have Peter Kuster from the Federal Chancellery of Austria, who is also going to speak about a project of digital ready legislation in Austria. And we hope that in general digital ready policymaking and it has somehow found a place in your heart like it has done for us, and we hope that more and more member states are going to start applying these principles and having really this change of mindset. So thank you all to this wonderful. Yeah.
But just we had this. For me, it's successful because Finland just came to say they are no more here, but they joined the club. So we are very happy. And please, if you are not the ones, really, please spread the message, spread the word to the people who would be the one coming to this type of meeting. So thank you very much. Yeah.